like Marcon, Valenethius, and Montanus, ooh, anus. While the Jewish Christians church were centered in Jerusalem, and the first century Gentile Christianity became decentralized in the second century. Although the use of the term Christian is attested to the Acts of the Apostles in between 80 and 90 AD, the earliest recorded use of the term Christianity is by Ignatius of Antioch about 107 AD, who is also associated with the modification of the Sabbath, promotion of a bishop, and the critique of the Judaizers. There are too many big words in this presentation.
Good job.
Thanks. In the third century, it was largely a time for the ante-Nicene fathers who wrote after the apostolic fathers of the first and second centuries, but before the first Council of Nicaea, which we're going to get into in a minute, in 325. The Edict of Milan and the Roman emperors Constantine the Great and Licinius legalized the Christianity or Christian religion around 313 AD. So 300 years after Christ had died, it is now an official religion. That's a long time to play telephone.
It really is.
And by that, I mean most of history during this time wasn't, unless it was Roman. Romans kept really good records. But outside of that, other than Romans, Egypt, places of that nature that had a lot of writings, a lot of the people were actually illiterate. So, basically they're telling tales and stories over and over again for 300 years, and tell me that doesn't ring to somebody out there that that isn't what I said.
No kidding. I mean, in school, I played telephone, and can you count the number of times, or can I count the number of times that we actually got through 28 students?
Yeah.
And got the same message that was actually given to him by the teacher?
None.
No.
And part of that, I mean, you have to attribute part of that to kids being just dicks. Like, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say this instead. But if people were actually, and again, it was a verbal history lesson, basically, that's being passed down from generation to generation. And even then, it gets kind of mixed up.
And I think it's kind of interesting with Constantine, at least, that the primary reason he actually set the Christianity becoming a religion into motion is because he was dying on his deathbed, and he's like, well, if I get a vision given to me by Christ himself that I'm going to win this battle, and I actually do win this battle, then I'm going to believe it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Didn't quite happen that way, but close enough.
like, that seems to me like an interesting deathbed.
Well, and he claims to have seen a giant flaming cross in the sky. We can get into ancient alien theory and stuff like that later, but that isn't part of this. So we're not going to go there. Now, the Council of Nicaea was in 325 AD. It was also called the First Council of Nicaea. And the first ecumenical, I said it right the first time, Council of the Christian Church, meeting in ancient Nicaea, which is now Iznik in Turkey. It was also called by the Emperor Constantine the First, an unbaptized catechumen who presided over the opening session and took part in the discussions. He hoped a general council of the church would solve the problem created in the Eastern Church, a heresy that was first proposed by Eris of Alexandria that affirmed that Christ is not divine but a created being. Pope Sylvester the First did not attend the council but was represented by people, legates. The council also attempted but failed to establish a uniform date for Easter, but it issued decrees on many other matters, including the proper method of consecrating a bishop, the condemnation of lending money at interest by clerics, so they could no longer get into the money game. The refusal to allow bishops, priests, and deacons to move from one church to another. 15th century Byzantine historian Socrates, you may know him, said that the council intended to make canon enforcing celibacy of the clergy, but it failed to do so when some objected. Of course, it confirmed the what am I saying here? It also confirmed the primacy of Alexandria and Jerusalem over the other sees in the respective areas. Gosh.
Wait a minute, but you mentioned Easter. I thought Easter was a pagan or Egyptian goddess.
That's Esther, but yeah.
Esther. I thought I read something about Easter being one of the original Rome. Oh, it was Roman. That's right. And
yeah, it's Roman and Jewish, and you know, because you have the Jewish Passover, and then you have Easter. But yeah, in the Middle Ages, as Europe experienced a lack of strong central government, the feudal system provided some political stability. The feudal system provided some political stability, but the Catholic Church. What is a church? The Catholic Church also provided stability in the Middle Ages. We won't be talking about things like the whole Inquisition and everything, but the church appealed to people of all social classes. So basically what that's saying is, like, rich or poor, the Catholic Church appealed to them because salvation was within everybody's grasp. Now keep in mind, during this time, there are still pagan religions that worship other deities. After Constantine recognized Christianity as his religion and made it the religion of the empire, a lot of those temples were destroyed or you know, just left to rot, but they still existed, and there were still people that would worship other gods. So there was the reconstruction of the church in the Middle Ages. Now, this is what I found interesting too. So I'm going to go through these point by point. So the Catholic Church has clergy or religious officials. It has the Pope, who is the head of the Catholic Church. All clergy were under the authority of the Pope. Bishops supervised local parish priests, and local parish priests had the greatest influence on most Europeans because they had the contact with the people. The canon is church law, and this obviously was a religious thing. The church was religious. Okay.
Also sounds very very political. You've got
absolutely,
like I see the Pope as kind of like the president, the clergy, or more like your Secretary of Defense, your Secretary of this, and it all just seems very, very political and self-motivated.
And that's where we come to this, where the Roman Empire was. This is how the Roman Empire was structured. It's not the Republic, meaning, you know, there is no democracy here. The emperor was the head of the Roman Church or Roman Empire. Everyone was under the authority of the emperor. Regional governors ran the provinces. Generals and centurions controlled the military. It was a very imperialistic law, meaning everyone had to obey the Roman law or pay the price. And it was secular or non-religious. So if you look at that, you have the emperor, the Pope. You have the clergy, or we'll say the bishops are the regional governors. The generals and centurions are the same as the priests. And then you have a law system where the canon law of the church is absolute, right? It's supposed to be the word of God, even though it's the word of man. And then you have imperial law. So it was restructured into a way that was very politically inclined. You know, in most cases, the bishops or the Pope even had a very big effect on how the Roman Empire or the empires that came thereafter were structured. You see this a lot in like Russia as well. This is much after this time, but yeah, in Russia you also saw this as well, where the church had its leaders like side by side with the Russian patriarch, or however you want to look at that. So there was definitely an era of politics amongst the church.
And I think it's also a point to note that, with as political as this seems, having mentioned this in a past episode, that everything in politics seems to base off of fear as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Follow us or
die.
Pretty much.
Yep.
So
well, that's how it was back then. Follow us or die. Do as we say or die. Work or die.
And it's like, if Jesus's message was love thy neighbor, but also love thy enemy, and just promoted love, why are they turning it into this fear-based facade?
Well, and again, I've said it before, I think, well, in private, I've said it before, but the church is probably one of the most political organizations I've ever looked at. Just telling everybody they're very quiet. Okay, so we move on more into the medieval times with the Crusades. And in response to the announcement by Pope Urban II of a crusade to the Holy Land to retake Jerusalem from the Turkish Muslims, Christian forces from Western Europe converged on Constantinople, where they united with Byzantine forces to attack the Turk armies in Anatolia and Muslim armies in Syria and Palestine by 1099. So 4 years later, the Crusaders had achieved their goal, capture of the city of Jerusalem. However, Christian territories acquired during the First Crusade were gradually lost over the next 200 years, and Jerusalem was recaptured by the Muslim forces in 1187. And the last Christian stronghold in the Holy Land fell in 1291. So we're talking a period of 200 years. In the aftermath of the First Crusade, from 1096 to 1099, Europeans carved out 4 states in Palestine on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Many castles and fortresses were built to protect these states from Muslim forces. However, the Muslims gradually recaptured the territory, and European presence in Palestine ended with the fall of the city of Acre in 1291. The Crusades weakened Constantinople, which fell to the Turks in 1453. In fact, the Crusaders helped to band the Muslims together to expel the Crusaders. Interesting. And this began the shift of the Eastern Orthodox Church center of power towards the Ukraine or in Russia.
Funny how fear will do that to people. They fear for their lives, and all of a sudden they're creating this massive force against the attacker.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, the whole thing about the Crusades with the churches, or the Christianity going to eradicate essentially the Muslim religion, kind of strikes a chord with me, because that kind of seems like what we're doing now, going over to the Middle Eastern countries and trying to convert everybody away from it. It's like,
away from the Muslim religion, you mean?
Yeah, and all of a sudden, in the mainstream media, it's like, oh, if you're living next door to a Muslim, you're in danger, that they're evil, and it's like, are we in another crusade?
Well, I don't know if that's the narrative of the modern or our media. I think our media is more like, let them come and take us over. But I'm not entirely sure on that at this point.
It kind of feels to me like we're entering another era of crusades at this point.
Could be. Now, in 1378, the two rival popes, Pope Urban in the east and Clement Pope Urban in the west and Clement in the east, were elected. Now, Pope Urban was elected first, but not deemed fit by many others for the position, which is interesting because that whole system has changed now. Clement VII was elected and moved as a captive to Avignon, France, where the French king welcomed him. And again, this was church-state stuff. Allegiances to the Pope was a politically motivated. This is what we talked about a minute ago. Conflict between Rome and Avignon lasted about 50 years and led to the call for the reform in the church affairs. The problem was solved by the Council of Constance in 1414 or 1418. The schism sowed the seeds for reform within the Catholic Church and for the Protestant Reformation movement, which is interesting because if you ask a Protestant now what they're protesting, they have no idea. And then this leads to the Great Reform. So the quote-unquote straw that broke the camel's back was corruption of the church at all levels. Lutheranism is the first Protestant church which spreads to Scandinavia. Henry VIII creates the Anglican Church, a personal matter that later turned to doctrine or doctrinal matters.
Right, because the previous religions would not allow for divorce.
Exactly, and he was a hoe. So one thing I do want to mention here too is that if you're reading a Bible that comes anytime after 1611, you're missing roughly 40 books from that Bible, whether you knew it or not. There were 40 things that were, or 40 books in the Bible that were removed sometime in 1611 by King James. And that was so that he would be able to pacify and control the people.
I don't like this. I'm taking it out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the King James version of the Bible that most people have today is post 1615, I believe, is when it was actually published. So I have some videos here. And I wanted to mention these because these were really interesting. Now, this is off of somebody named Muhammad Quatums, Qathem, his YouTube channel, but it's actually from a history documentary or discovery documentary. I can't remember which, but I'm going to shut up and let y'all watch this.
Literary and astrological hybrid is most explicitly a plagiarization of the Egyptian sun god Horus. For example, inscribed about 3,500 years ago on the walls at the Temple of Luxor in Egypt are images of the Annunciation, the miracle conception, the birth, and the adoration of Horus. The images begin with Thoth announcing to the Virgin Isis that she will conceive Horus, then Neph, the Holy Ghost, impregnating the Virgin, and then the virgin birth and the adoration. This is exactly the story of Jesus' miracle conception. In fact, the literary similarities between the Egyptian religion and the Christian religion are staggering. And the plagiarism is continuous. The story of Noah and Noah's Ark is taken directly from tradition. The concept of literary and astrological hybrid is most explicitly a plagiarization of the Egyptian sun god Horus. For example, inscribed about 3,500 years ago on the walls at the Temple of Luxor in Egypt are images of the Annunciation, the miracle conception, the birth, and the adoration of Horus. The images begin with Thoth announcing to the Virgin Isis that she will conceive Horus, then Neph, the Holy Ghost, impregnating the Virgin, and then the virgin birth and the adoration. This is exactly the story of Jesus' miracle conception. In fact, the literary similarities between the Egyptian religion and the Christian religion are staggering.
Well, I apologize. I thought this was going to play through, but we'll listen to it then.
And the plagiarism is continuous. The story of Noah and Noah's Ark is taken directly from tradition. The concept of the Great Flood is ubiquitous throughout the ancient world, with over 200 cited claims in different periods and times. However, one need look no further for a pre-Christian source than the Epic of Gilgamesh, written in 2600 BC. This story talks of a great flood commanded by God an ark with saved animals upon it, and even the release and return of a dove, all held in common with the biblical story, among many other similarities. And then there is the plagiarized story of Moses. Upon Moses' birth, it is said that he was placed in a reed basket and set adrift in a river in order to avoid infanticide. He was later rescued by a daughter of royalty and raised by her as a prince. This baby in a basket story was lifted directly from the myth of Sargon of Akkad of around 2250 BC. Sargon was born, placed in a reed basket in order to avoid infanticide, and set adrift in a river. He was in turn rescued and raised by Aki, a royal midwife. Furthermore, Moses is known as the lawgiver, the giver of the Ten Commandments, the Mosaic Law. However, the idea of a law being passed from God to a prophet up on a mountain is also a very old motif. Moses is just another lawgiver in a long line of lawgivers in mythological history. In India, Manu was the great lawgiver. In Crete, Minos ascended Mount Dicta, where Zeus gave him the sacred laws, while in Egypt there was Meses, who carried stone tablets, and upon them the laws of God were written. Manu, Minos, Meses, Moses. And as far as the Ten Commandments, they are taken outright from spell 125 in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. What the Book of the Dead phrased, "I have not stolen," became "Thou shalt not steal." "I have not killed," became "Thou shalt not kill." "I have not told lies," became "Thou shalt not bear false witness," and so forth. In fact, the Egyptian religion is likely the primary foundational basis for the Judeo-Christian theology. Baptism, afterlife, final judgment, virgin birth, death and resurrection, crucifixion, the Ark of the Covenant, circumcision, saviors, Holy Communion, Great Flood, Easter, Christmas, Passover, and many, many more are all attributes of Egyptian ideas long predating Christianity and Judaism. Justin Martyr, one of the first Christian historians and defenders, wrote, "When we say that he, Jesus Christ, our teacher, was produced without sexual union, was crucified and died and rose again and ascended into heaven, we propound nothing different from what you believe regarding those who you esteem sons of Jupiter." In a different writing, Justin Martyr said, "He was born of a virgin, except this in common with what you believe of Perseus." It's obvious that Justin and other early Christians knew how similar Christianity was to the pagan religions. However, Justin had a solution. As far as he was concerned, the devil did it. The devil had the foresight to come before Christ and create his characteristics in the pagan world.
Fundamentalist Christianity, fascinating. These people actually believe the world is 12,000 years old. Swear to God. I actually asked one of these guys, okay, dinosaur fossils. He says, dinosaur fossils? God put those here to test our faith. I think God put you here to test my faith, dude.
The Bible is nothing more than an astrotheological literary hybrid, just like nearly all religious myths before it. In fact, the aspect of transference of one character's attributes to a new character can be found within the book itself. In the Old Testament, there is the story of Joseph. Joseph was a prototype for Jesus. Joseph was born of a miracle birth. Jesus was born of a miracle birth. Joseph was of 12 brothers. Jesus had 12 disciples. Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver. Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver. Brother Judah suggests the sale of Joseph. Disciple Judas suggests the sale of Jesus. Joseph began his work at the age of 30. Jesus began his work at the age of 30. The parallels go on and on. Furthermore, is there any non-biblical historical evidence of any person living with the name Jesus, the son of Mary, who traveled about with 12 followers, healing people and the like? There are numerous historians who lived in and around the Mediterranean, either during or soon after the assumed life of Jesus. How many of these historians document this figure? Not one. However, to be fair, that doesn't mean defenders of the historical Jesus haven't claimed the contrary. 4 historians are typically referenced to justify Jesus' existence. Pliny the Younger, Suetonius, and Tacitus are the first 3. Each one of their entries consists of only a few sentences at best, and only referred to Christus or the Christ, which in fact is not a name but a title. It means the Anointed One. The 4th source is Josephus, and this source has been proven to be a forgery for hundreds of years. Sadly, it is still cited as truth. You would think that a guy who rose from the dead and ascended into heaven for all eyes to see and performed the wealth of miracles acclaimed to him would have made it into the historical record. It didn't, because once the evidence is weighed, there are very high odds that the figure known as Jesus did not even exist.
We don't want to be unkind, but we want to be factual. We don't want to cause hurt feelings, but we want to be academically correct in what we understand and know to be true. Christianity just is not based on truth. We find that Christianity was in fact nothing more than a Roman story, developed politically.
The reality is, Jesus was the solar deity of the Gnostic Christian sect, and like all other pagan gods, he was a mythical figure. It was the political establishment that sought to historize the Jesus figure for social control. By 325 AD in Rome, Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea. It was during this meeting that the politically motivated Christian doctrines were established, and thus began a long history of Christian bloodshed and spiritual fraud. And for the next 1600 years, the Vatican maintained a political stranglehold on all of Europe, leading to such joyous periods as the Dark Ages, along with enlightening events such as the Crusades and the Inquisition. Christianity, along with all other theistic belief systems, is the fraud of the age. It serves to detach the species from the natural world, and likewise each other. It supports blind submission to authority. It reduces human responsibility to the effect that God controls everything, and in turn awful crimes can be justified in the name of a divine pursuit. And most importantly, it empowers those who know the truth, but use the myth to manipulate and control societies. The religious myth is the most powerful device ever created and serves as the psychological soil upon which other myths can flourish.
Well, I want to apologize for not actually showing the video, but just a picture from it. But at least you were able to hear it, so that's a plus. So, what do you think of that?
I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying about Easter being Egyptian or Roman, because I know the Romans invaded Egypt, and that's how the whole issue with Cleopatra happened. And so I want to think that during that invasion, conquering
Time.
session, yeah,
Session.
that they learned the Egyptians' history, they learned their belief system, and then they ended up turning it into their own, in a sense, to pacify the people when it came to Jesus.
Well, and I always wondered about the plagiarisms of the Christian faith. And I say that I used to be a priest, believe it or not. But I found there's a lot of inconsistencies, like what's his name? The dog-faced boy. I can't remember him now, but he is a saint. And I mentioned this to you, I think, in a different episode, 1 or 2, I think, where, he was so beautiful and he didn't want to be bothered with people, and so God made him into a dog-faced boy and gave him the the ability to ferry people into the afterlife.
Kind of sounds like
Anubis?
Yeah.
So there's another one, and I think it's just these ones from YouTube that aren't going to play. But this is from another channel, Myths and Symbols, which is the channel name. And it's about Jesus's life and whether it was plagiarized. I'm going to go ahead and play it really quick. I think it's a short one. We'll see. But I think you'll find this one interesting too.
Just after the Second World War, there was an incredible series of archaeological discoveries in the UK. They revealed a network of Roman temples from London in the south to Hadrian's Wall in the north. They were dedicated to a pagan religion that existed at the same time as Christianity, and to a god who had striking similarities to Jesus, Mithras. Lindsay Allison-Jones is the director of the Museum of Antiquities at the University of Newcastle, and an expert in the mystery cult of Mithras.
Oh wow, this looks really well preserved.
It is, isn't it? Yes.
Now, what could I have expected to see if it was in its original condition?
You probably wouldn't have seen very much at all because it was sunk right down. The worshippers of Mithras were trying to reconstruct, in a sense, the original cave of Mithras. So they wanted it dark, they wanted it subterranean. This would have been the doorway. You would have gone in through here. You would then come in through here into the actual temple itself. And you'd see in front of you the 3 altars there. And behind that, there would be a large relief showing Mithras killing the primeval bull. That was the act of creation for the worshippers of Mithras.
May he bring us help. May he bring us comfort. May he bring us joy. He, the awful and overpowering, worthy of sacrifice and prayer. Mithra, the lord of wide pastures.
And Mithras is a god to the good side, I presume, the light.
Yes, Mithras was the lord of light. He was basically attached to the sun god, who ordered Mithras to go and kill the primeval bull to release life force for the benefit of mankind.
That's interesting symbolism there.
Yes.
So you've got this powerful deity and then this kind of sub-deity who acts as a kind of saviour figure for humankind.
The rise of Mithras almost exactly parallels the rise of Jesus, although his origins could be much more ancient. Some say he was created by the Romans, others that he came from Persia and India.
Mithras was seen as a saviour god. He was unusual amongst the gods in that you weren't really trying to bribe him in quite the same way that they were trying to bribe some of the other deities to make sure that your life on earth was as comfortable as possible. Mithras was rare in that he actually offered you a life after death.
So if Mithras predated Jesus and is also a saviour god who offered his followers a life after death, did Christianity steal these ideas?
It was a mystery cult. We certainly know that they were having ritual meals. It seems to have been a fairly basic feast, based largely on the chickens, on bread and on wine.
Bread and wine.
Bread and wine, yes.
You know, it's got similarities with early Christianity, the sense of feasting, the sense of discipline.
Just after the Second World War,
you work at things for your own good. There's a deity who is a god of light, who is sent by a major deity to kill
just
his
after the
nemesis
Second World
War, in order to redeem and save the world.
Yes, the early Christian fathers, who wrote a lot, were very upset about Mithraism. They thought that Mithraism was parodying Christianity.
This so infuriated many early Christians that they felt they had to publicly denounce Mithras and his worshippers. One 4th century Christian writer, Ambrosiaster, tried to demonize their secret rituals.
What travesty is it then that they enact in the cave with veiled faces? For they cover their eyes, lest their deeds of shame should revolt them. Some, like birds, flap their wings, imitating the raven's cry. Others roar like lions. Others bind their hands with the entrails of fowls and fling themselves down over pits full of water. What shameful mockeries for men who call themselves wise.
Another early church father, Justin Martyr, tried to claim it was Mithras who was copying Jesus.
Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, said, "This do ye in remembrance of me, this is my body." And having taken the cup and given thanks, he said, "This is my blood," and gave it to them alone, which the wicked devils have imitated in the mysteries of Mithras.
The problem for Christians was that the similarities did not stop there. One tradition claims Mithras even had a virgin birth.
Mithras, there are two stories, one that he was born from the living rock and the other that he was born from the cosmic egg.
So there is potentially a crossing of ideas and even potentially a merging of ideas between Mithras and early Christianity. Potentially.
There is even a story that Mithras's birth was witnessed by shepherds watching their sheep, but that again is a much later story, and you don't know whether at this point Christianity and Mithraism is all getting rather intertwined and it's getting confused.
Mithras was a pagan god with a story, a purpose, and elements of ritual very similar to that of Jesus, but one whose origins could predate him by thousands of years.
Early Christian fathers were very worried about the similarities between Christianity and Mithraism, especially the charge that Christianity borrowed many of its ideas from this pagan cult. So when paganism was officially outlawed, particular animosity was shown towards Mithraism. Many of its temples were destroyed, and others had churches built on top of them. But Mithraism did leave one mark on Christianity. When later church fathers were deciding what anniversary to celebrate the birthday of Jesus, they chose December the 25th, the winter solstice, which also happens to be the birthday of Mithras.
I had been told that there was another place, one of the key locations for early Christianity, where the similarities between Jesus and other pagan gods are even more obvious: Egypt. It has also always puzzled scholars why Christianity took hold so easily here. One theory claims it was because of its many parallels with ancient Egyptian religious ideas and rituals. Egyptologist Dr. Bojana Moisov is an expert in the ancient cult of Osiris. She claims it has uncanny similarities to Christianity and the story of Jesus. I met her in Abydos, in Upper Egypt, at the 3,300-year-old temple dedicated to the cult of Osiris.
Can you tell me what happened here?
Well, once a year there was a festival of Osiris, and the myth of Osiris is the most ancient myth of Egypt. The festival lasted for about a week and reached its culmination on the last 3 days. And on the first of those 3 days, the earth body of Osiris would be buried. During the second day, vigils in the temple were said for the god's resurrection. And then on the morning of the third day, the statue was brought out into the court through here, and all the pilgrims who have gathered from all over Egypt celebrated the resurrection of Osiris.
How common was that kind of story? Because for me, the story of death and resurrection of a deity emerges with Christianity. So was it common for people to think this way?
Well, in the Nile Valley it was. And in the ancient Near East you also have the myths of the sacrificed savior gods who died for their people and were resurrected, came back to life, and would lead all the righteous souls to salvation and eternal life.
What would I have seen if I was here 3,000, 4,000 years ago?
During the festival, on that night where they buried Osiris, lights were lit and candles were lit all over Egypt to commemorate his burial. So if you imagine the temple, which is full of light, full of incense, people carrying candles and praying for the god's resurrection, the mystery of it, chanting prayers for his resurrection. If you imagine incense, candlelight, vigils, it would have been magical.
Many similar rituals are still carried on today by the Egyptian Coptic Church.
Which other elements within this passion play, within this myth, have parallels with Christianity?
Well, baptism in the holy river, in the Nile, which were considered to be a sacred river, the sacred Nile water, which was carried into the temple, and the statues were anointed with it.
Linda, I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
The eating of corn bread as the body of Osiris, because corn came about through the sacrifice of Osiris. So this whole eating of bread and drinking of beer that issued from the risen God is also paralleled by the Eucharist Mass in Christianity.
So the corn bread and the beer are paralleled today by having the bread and the wine.
Exactly. There's a very interesting image in that last room, and it consists of the dead Osiris as a mummy placed on a lion bed. His wife, Isis, hovers over him like a kite, like a bird, and at this moment they're engendering the Savior child. So it is the moment that life is being transferred from death to life, from father to son.
So it's sort of like a miraculous birth.
It's a miraculous birth of the Savior child.
Wow. These are ideas that we find in the Christian story of Jesus. This is a major revelation because it seems to me you're suggesting that the idea of a Saviour God who redeems the world doesn't just begin with modern Europe, doesn't even begin with the ancient Near East. It goes all the way back to the earliest forms of human experience out of Africa.
Absolutely, it does.
So, yeah. Again, I apologize. I did put the link into the chat room, though. So if you do want to go ahead and take a look at that video, you can at any given point in time. And I'm assuming that it's, well, I'm not going to say anything until I figure it out why it's not playing in here, but I'll fix it next time, dang it. So, yeah.
It seems to me that over the centuries and over the years and years of belief systems, Egyptians, Romans, the Jews, everybody, it seems like the people in charge of religion are merely looking for the best way to connect with their subjects and then control them thereafter.
Well, if you look at, I mean, going all the way back, there was always like you gave something to the god that you were worshiping. So in the pantheons that had like multiple gods, for example, the Greek, the Egyptians, the Romans even, which Roman religion was very, very much plagiarized as well. You had Zeus and you had Jupiter, you know, the Greek and Roman gods. So there's always been this feeling, at least in my personal belief, that the gods were plagiarized off of one particular god that you can go back and research on yourself. But I would highly recommend looking at religions like the ancient Sumerian religions, which had many tales that sound very much like the Bible stories, and kind of go from there, because somewhere this all came into being. You know, people aren't that creative to create everything just out of nothing. It's very hard for them to do that. So definitely take a look at these kind of videos and kind of see for yourself. So where does this leave us? This leaves us to the church of today. Here's the thing, right? The church of today, with the age of the internet, there is no shortage of information in our culture. But there is like a huge shortage of meaning. And some of our stuff later on, when we're talking about the law of one and certain things of that nature, will give you a lot more meaning to go by, to digest and see what it means to you. But it's always been one thing to know something that's happening and another to know what to do with it, and which tends to matter most, whether it's the issue or the solution too. We see this today in church and our politics, and how they've become intermingled, even though they say, oh, separation of church and state, but that's never been the real case. Even way back in the beginning of the Americas, when we were still a WASP nation, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant nation, even back then. And a lot of our initial laws and rights were governed by the church. Second, leaders who fail to navigate the disruptive trends happening in our culture won't be left with much to lead. I think you mentioned this during playing one of those videos, is that, if the 99% stand up for themselves finally, shit's going to go down. I mean, that's how it works. You're not going to be able to control the masses if the masses rise up against you. So what do? You make stories up. You create hell. You create a system where you're dividing the people. And that's very, very prevalent today. You have the Democrats and the Republicans. You have the Christians and the Muslims. You have, all these different ways to divide us. And the more we are divided, the less we are to rise up against the real enemy, which is, in my opinion, our government.
Well, in the government here, even in America, we've got 3.5 billion people in this country alone. And how many of them are in politics? Maybe 1,000, if I'm being really generous there.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have the people in the states, and then you have the higher government and stuff like that. But this leads into my next point. Leaders who pretend nothing needs to change end up being the blacksmith in the era of the automobile. They believe, or they're the seers in the age of God, I cannot read. Amazon or Kodak in an Instagram culture. It's just not going to work. Your antiquated things need to be able to change to today's society. I get into that here in the next slide, I believe, too. But if you ever hope to reach the next generation, change is your friend, and it must be embraced. You can't talk about things that don't apply to people today like they do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I also see this in a ton of small businesses, and I realize we're talking religion here, but I've seen so many small business owners saying, well, we've always done it this way. It's always worked this way. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to adapt technology into my business. I still want to fax everything. I still want to snail mail everything. And they become a relic.
Yep. And yeah, I don't even have a fax machine at my office. So if that tells you anything, and I deal with a lot of agencies, both government and professional and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, do you have a number we can fax this to? I'm like, no.
Email me something.
Email it to me. Send it as fucking whatever. But yeah, no, I don't have a fax machine. I'm not wasting paper on your spam. Sorry. So life. So here's the problem with today's church as I see it. The charismatic expression of the church will grow while the attraction churches will continue to stall out. And in other words, basically, where it becomes personal and more emotional and it's more real and you can feel it, that's going to grow, where the attractional churches, like the ones that want you to come to them, the ones that play the funky music and stuff like that, are all going to stall out, because it's not, you're putting a Band-Aid on a wound that needs stitches. Charismatic expressions of the church. Let me explain that first. That means that it's something that's tailored to you, that you can understand, that you can relate with. Those kind of churches are the ones that'll grow. Attractional churches, again, the ones with the funky bands, the ones that don't really preach, or I don't want to use the term preach, but don't really give you that one-on-one kind of feeling, the ability to become emotionally invested. Yeah, they're a great place to go on Sunday for a couple hours in the afternoon and hear great music and dance and sing, but they don't really do anything for you on that spiritual level. Online churches are going to evolve to become a front door and a side door rather than a back door. And this is something that a lot of churches were against, and even still are against, is giving the ability for people to absorb that content on their own time. In today's society, it is very hard to find an hour or 2 hours that you can get up, get dressed, go to this place, see what they're saying, understand what they're saying, et cetera, that one-on-one kind of personal touch, which isn't really one-on-one personal. It's 1 to say 100 or 20, depending on this congregation size. But the ability to do that is just as obsolete as having a stay-at-home mom who takes care of the house, the kids, and the cooking and all that kind of stuff when the dad is doing the breadwinning. You know what I mean? It's that kind of antiquated kind of sentiment that's going to kill the church.
Definitely. And I also think
vacuums coming in here.
that it's kind of crazy. Like, I realize things are slowly changing, but like the whole concept of if I go to church once a week, I'm absolved of my attitude the rest of the week. And that kind of like gets on my nerves.
Yeah, I can sin all week, but then on Sunday I have to pay for it.
Or I can confess to the Father in the next room over, and all of a sudden everything's forgiven.
It's like a weight has been lifted.
I'm sorry, that's not how it works. Personal, just, it's crazy to me. And, I mean, I've seen pictures of church signs as like, Jesus had 2 dads and he turned out fine, which I actually like that because they're trying to incorporate, the LGBTQ community.
XYZ, PDQ.
the bisexual, multisexual, transgender communities, which I think that's awesome. But again, and that would be the charismatic expression. But it just seems off to think that you can go to church once a week and be like, I can treat people like
well,
shit.
I used to have a saying that if you want to be absolved of everything and not really, repent, you could always go to the Catholic Church because, they'll let you do it for $20. Anyway, let's move on here. Churches and organizations will begin staffing online like it was a real thing. Up to this point, a lot of churches don't spend money on online presence. They do something that maybe once every 3 or 4 years they pay somebody to go in and fix their website and bring it up to date and stuff, but then they don't do anything with it. I think in order for churches as a general to succeed in today's society, they need to add that online presence that gives you that, and I'm getting into this next one too, that consumer-centered approach. Which again is the next one here. Consumer-centered approaches to church will continue to lose momentum. This is antiquated thinking. This is, the woman has to stay home and take care of the kids kind of thinking. In today's world, we don't have the time necessarily. That's really annoying. We don't have the time necessarily as a family. Like, I can't remember the last time that I was able to actually have one day off that I knew I would have off, that I could do only the things that I wanted to and go to church. And as a family, it's even harder. If you have kids, if you have a wife or a husband, getting that same time off today is much more difficult than it was, say, 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I had a weekend off.
Exactly. And that's why we do this on Monday, because, typically it's a very dead kind of day. But those consumer-centered approaches, and that's what I'm talking about when I say you're able to get online when you want to. You can see Sunday's Mass from a webcam and a video that's on YouTube or wherever a lot easier than you can go to that church and take that time to do it. But, sometimes you might have a half an hour during the day where you can watch part of it and then come home later and watch another part of it and whatever the case might be there.
And
wow, that vacuum is really loud.
Also, a point to note is that, again, I saw that, I saw a meme on Facebook that said, when they start protesting socks as much as they protest gays, I'll believe it's for religious reasons. And this also, again, strikes a chord with me because, yes, in the Bible, it says that thou shalt not wear clothing made of more than one material. So, yeah, polyester and spandex, there's two materials for you right there.
Well, those are both hybrid materials. They're, cotton and whatever.
Yeah, and therefore it's like you're wearing socks, but yet at the same time, you're more than willing to point out something about somebody else that you don't like and claim that it is for religious reasons.
Well,
that drives me nuts.
You have the religious right-wingers who are saying that the Bible says that you can't be gay, that the Bible says this, that, and the other thing. You have to remember, the Bible was written by who? It wasn't written by the biblical Jesus. It was written by men. And I say that not just men, mankind wrote that. It's not the word of of God. Now, you will never be able to convince me in the Bible it says that you can't be gay. There is something that says, like, a man shall not lie with a man for whatever. But you have to read the whole thing, because in the context of that verse, it's not talking about homosexuality. I don't care what you say, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but God, wow. Yeah, I don't want to get into that right now. So we're just going to move on. So these are other problems with today's church. Scandals, child sex, pedophiles, rape culture. How people become priests is always interesting. You can pretty much just go to a church and say, yeah, I want to become a priest. And then you get free board, free clothing, all that kind of good stuff free. And you go through this quote unquote schooling to become a priest. Wow. Okay. Low attendance in church services is a huge problem. When I was a priest, I think our parish consisted of like 12 people total. Now, the interesting thing about that is on like big services like Pascha or Easter, you would find, 40 or 50 people there. So you have that, I go to church twice a year kind of thing. Oh, yeah, I'm good.
Wow, that's even better than the once a week I'm absolved.
Yeah. And one thing I always found funny, I was a priest in this one church, and it was always great because during confession, you'd hear everyone else's sins but the person that you were hearing the confession from. So it was like, yeah, my dad does this, and this, and then the dad would come in. Yeah, my son does this, and this. It's like, okay, what am I absolving you of today? So, because it was a bunch of families and stuff, I always found it interesting because you would sit there and you would get the whole story of what was going through or what was going on at the end of that family's confessional, because everybody told you what everybody else was doing.
Well, it kind of seems like absolving them of judgment at the very least.
Well, and then there's the morality shift in life. Religion, sex, relationships, charity. These are things that are going away. Well, except for sex. So what I mean by those is, like, for example, it's more cool to be polyamorous than it is to be monogamous. It's more accepted to be LGBTQ, XYZ, whatever, than it is to be straight. It's, and again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because my understanding of God is God is love. It isn't love everything but this person or that person. It's love everybody, everything. We're also losing faith in our church leaders for those reasons: the scandals, the sex, the corruption, et cetera, et cetera. How can you have faith in a doctrine that promotes child sex and pedophiles and the rape culture of how you hear just about every month or so at least one thing about Catholic priests being on trial for raping children and stuff?
I couldn't. But then again, I consider myself more spiritual than religious, so...
Exactly. Pardon me, I got hiccups. Also, God is being removed from government, monies, laws, buildings, flags, songs, everything. They've taken God off everything but our money at this point. It says in God we trust, and that's still there, but the national anthem is being rewritten or was at one point going to be rewritten to remove the God part.
Well, except for Alabama, I think they recently passed an amendment to actually have the 10 Commandments carved in stone on the Capitol, but hey.
Yeah, and I think it was Georgia, actually, that removed that. I could be wrong about that, but there was I know wherever it was, there was, an edifice or a carving of the 10 Commandments outside the courthouse that was removed. So these are all problems that plague the church of today. And where does that leave us? So we have God versus the church. What's the difference? The church, in my mind, is a good starting point, but it is not the end all be all of your relationship with God. God is an entity, a energy, however you want to look at it. There's different ways to look at God. You can look at him as the old guy on the throne. That's one popular way. You can look at it as the universe itself. You can look at it as an energy source that has literally brought everything into being. Exactly. You don't need God's love to move through life. As I can't read your name, Gastert. I can't. If you want, by all means, please tell me how to pronounce that. Yeah. So Soul. Okay, that works too. Soul says in Twitch, he or she, I'm sorry, I don't know what you are. They say you don't really need God's love to move through life. And I believe that's true. I think the relationship that you have with God is a very personal one, and it has to be one of yours. I can't tell you what your relationship with God is. I can't tell you how you should act or how you should be. Now, I'm going to show something, hopefully, in a minute that kind of sums that part up. Okay, he. Soul is a he. Thanks, man. So, the other thing is, has church killed God? It's my personal belief that any deity ever that is worshipped exists, at least in the minds of those who worship it. I mean, why wouldn't they? You can create things out of being, and we'll get into that in later episodes, or out of sheer willpower. But has the church killed God? And I think this is a valid question, because like I said, how can you believe in a system or a deity that allows these hideous things to happen with the people that are supposed to be the ones closest to it,
Well, and that also begs the question from atheists, and I happen to know quite a few of them. It's like, if God exists and God is so good, why does he allow such bad things to happen, and especially in his own house? And, coming from a spiritual perspective and taking the energy belief that God is merely the energy that creates everything, it's that everything has to have a balance. Science has proven this. For everything, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And if there was strictly light, strictly love, strictly goodness, that would create an imbalance, honestly. And without, order, there cannot be chaos. Without chaos, there cannot be order. And I think the church has also given out this concept that everything's supposed to be perfect, everything's supposed to be pristine, and it's kind of created this misunderstanding that, why is there any bad? And, it's also created that rift between religious, spiritual, and atheists.
Well, you're going into more theological kind of conversations. And, if you go by the doctrine of the church, so to speak, the theological difference of why does bad things happen to me, which is essentially what you're saying there, is because, we have that free will. So, and again, for everything that we do, there's a reaction to that. Soul here says, really, in my opinion, faith and religion is really comfort, that people are going to go somewhere amazing when they pass, and all the people that did wrong get justice in the end. It is. And you'll find a lot of elderly people become more spiritual, or not spiritual. They become more religious as they get older. And, I think you're right on that. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about a comfort thing. So yeah, sorry, that kind of threw me off, but yeah, I do agree with that statement. Next point is, man's law versus the law of God. Again, I mentioned this earlier, King James Bible revision of 1611. It's missing more than 40 books from it. And it was done to pacify and control the people. They all met up and they were like, yeah, we can do this. We can do this. There is some, interesting things that I was reading. I don't know if they're factual or not, but one of them was that, during this time is when hell became part of the Bible. Like, hell was never actually mentioned. Prior to that, yeah, exactly. And Soul says again, and once you really stare death, or he says dead, but death in the face, you don't know what is on the other side. You realize you don't exactly need religion. And that's very true too. I always love the argument that, well, if I'm right about Jesus and God and stuff like that, and you're wrong thinking that it doesn't happen, well, doesn't it just make sense to just believe it anyway? And that's blind faith. That's bullshit. I'm sorry. It's bullshit. Blind faith is dumb. You cannot believe in something that you don't believe in. I mean, to put it bluntly.
Kind of like people do with the government.
Exactly. Hey, my government wouldn't lie to me. That reminds me of the South Park. Hello, government. Poor Butters. Anyway, what about other religions? I've seen this on more than one occasion, especially, and it's very Christian. The whole I'm wrong, you're wrong, I'm right, you're going to hell and I'm not, have a nice life. Really? That doesn't really make sense, but okay. If you're a Christian person, you're supposed to love, right? I mean, if you're a Buddhist, you're supposed to love. If you're Muslim, you're supposed to love. I mean, and this is my next point. All the prophets of God have had the same message. Love your neighbor, love your brother, love your sister, love your parents, love. Not love everybody but that homosexual guy down the street, or love everybody except for that whore, or love everybody except, there was no but. If you're to believe in Jesus and you're a Christian person, right? He took Mary Magdalene, right? Who was a whore, and
possessed by several demons.
She was going to be stoned to death. And I don't mean like, I mean like with rocks. And he said, let ye among you without sin cast the first stone. And everyone was like, oh, well, fuck. And they all walked off. Again, if you believe this stuff. I think that the church and the Bible are a good starting point to morality. I think at least the older books, not necessarily the younger ones. Soul says, thou shalt not kill is something I clearly remember in the Bible, but I don't understand. We kill people in wars and crusades. We killed several people under the name of God. Exactly. And I think with the exception of very few religious type things, they always have something in there about a holy war. And war can't be holy to begin with. If you look at the Christian God, so to speak, and all the people that have been killed in his name, how can he, she, it, whatever you want to call it, be a force of good? Yeah, that's a very good point.
And you mentioned that hell was not originally mentioned in the Bible, that it was never claimed to exist, and then that comes in as this aspect of fear of what happens to those that don't believe. And again, going slightly spiritual here, but recently scientists proved that bodies upon weight just seconds prior to death, and then the weight of the body slightly, after death, is off by about 17 ounces weight-wise. And again, science going here, that energy cannot be destroyed. Therefore, the energy that possesses one's body, animates it, your soul, if you will, has to go somewhere. And if
you lost your train of thought, didn't you?
I did lose my train of thought. But it's kind of like there is definitely a place for your energy after life. I fully believe that. Or after this incarnation or whatever. But it definitely screams to me with that scientific breakthrough that the energy that animates this vessel does go somewhere.
Well, and again, we'll get into more energy and all that kind of stuff in the future. But so here's my summary of all the stuff that we've talked about. And I do want to mention this too. Soul says war is full of horrors and injustice. I don't think that wars that hurt people, normal people, is holy. And I agree with that. The Crusades were horrible times. I mean, fuck, even today's wars are even worse because it's like mass murder, and what is it over? It's over oil or resources, something along those lines. And typically in today's world, it's all oil. And we kind of touched on that before. It's because our economy is all oil-based. Ever since we went off the gold standard, we became the world's bitch, especially for countries that have the oil. We will protect them. We will go to war for them, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a really stupid thing. But here's my summary. I think the church as an entity, as a building, as a conglomeration is going to fall. And I think the morality of society and morality of the leaders of the church has degraded so much that it's at a tipping point. I think the founding principles in the church have been lost in politics, lies, scandal, and other bullshit that everybody knows about. You hear it all the time. This leads an interesting question. Has Satan won? If you believe in the Bible, if you believe in most religions, there's a good and a bad, right? You were talking about that balance. Yes. One of the things that was always said was that Satan's greatest deception is convincing others that he doesn't exist. Whoa. Noise. Thank you for whoever just gave me whatever it was. Yeah, exactly. And this is where I'm going with this. Soul says, greed has consumed us. Everything just fell apart. Take the items from your back and give them to, let's see, where'd I go? Give them to those who need it more than you. Well, capitalism, it really doesn't like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Charity is out the window. And again, this is part of that thing where you can't believe people anymore. For example, I pass by this guy every day going to work, and he's always on the corner saying that he's homeless, that he has nothing, and anything will help, right? Well, apparently this guy owns a really big house just up the street from where he's panhandling. And it's like, how do I know that? Because a friend of mine actually followed him home. He was like, yeah, that's not a homeless person by any means.
And I have several stories told to me by that, like that too. A guy in a wheelchair, homeless, disabled vet, need anything helps. And then I guess my dad decided to follow him one day, goes maybe 2 blocks around the corner and hops in a freaking expensive car.
Yeah. And so, even if you wanted to help thinking that, well, maybe they are really homeless and, you know, you want to do good, and you bring them food or you give them money or whatever. It's like you're always in the back of your mind thinking, exactly, humanity's greatest enemy is humanity itself. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So again, you can't believe what you're seeing. You can't believe what you read. You can't believe anything because it's always based on an agenda of somebody's. So with that said, did Satan win, or has Satan won? Has he overtaken God? We don't have morality in our relationships. We don't have morality in our politics. We don't have, you know, all this stuff has been gone, and it's kind of that whole thing where you want to just hit somebody. So there's an interesting question. If you believe in God and you believe in Satan or Lucifer, or however you want to look at it, the yin, the yang, whatever, is the dark side winning? And I don't mean Darth Vader, even though he's cool. He could win. But yeah, anyway, now overall, it's always your decision to have a relationship with whatever you consider God, whether that be the universal energy, whether that be the old man sitting on the throne of angels, or whatever it is. You need to decide what God is for you, if anything. And there's no problem and nothing wrong in my belief that believing that you yourself are God, because we are all made of the same shit. It doesn't matter. The only thing about human society is that we are constantly in that rat race for being, I need this, more. And it's our society and how our economy is set up to make you fail. We get into more of this, especially in our next episode.
Delving into the human rights.
Well,
and
education. Yeah. And we'll get into that later, but these are things that are fucked up.
And I'm very strong believer of karma. So if I do see a homeless guy, even if I have the slightest inkling that he may not be homeless, he may just think he can make more money than me by standing out on a corner, which is entirely likely. You know, I mean, doing good is, in my mind, going to bring good back to me. If I have an unopened piece of jerky in the car and, you know, I'm not going to eat it in the next couple days, hey, you know, I'll give it to him. If I have $1 that I know, you know, whatever, if I do good, I feel good's going to come back to me regardless whether or not they truly are that desperate in need. And
and that's charity at its base. I do want to interject here, because Soul says, what I find interesting is that Satan saved Samuel and saved us by rebelling against God. Does that mean Satan was a good person? Well, and again, good and evil are up to you to decide, but everybody knows the difference in their heart. If you're about to shoot somebody, you can't tell me at some point you're like, oh, fuck, this is a bad idea. You know, even if it's out of anger, you know, and a completely emotional one-time thing, you can't tell me that you're like, wow, this is wrong. At some point, on some level in your consciousness, every being knows good and evil, and I'm actually going to show you something about that.
And I'm going to flip back to Soul's previous comment about the weed. You know, on the whole comment about God created everything, in my mind, if God created everything, he created weed too. Go for it.
I have no problems with pot smokers.
I mean, I've used
None.
THC. It feels pretty good.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. You know, the same can't necessarily be said for a cigarette smoker, but I am one of those too. So, yeah. Now I'm hoping this will actually play. We'll see. If not, you can hear it. But eat my mac and cheese while you guys keep talking. Right on. There was a movie in 2001. It's called K-Pax. And although it has a very sci-fi kind of vibe to it, it's about this alien who comes to Earth and blah, 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 blah. But this is something that has stuck with me ever since. So I'm going to play this, and I hope it actually plays. We'll see. Great quotes, though. Here you go.
How do you know right from wrong?
Every being in the universe knows right from wrong, Mark. Let me tell you something, Mark. You humans, most of you, subscribe to this policy of an eye for an eye, a life for a life, which is known throughout the universe for its stupidity. Even your Buddha and your Christ had quite a different vision, but nobody's paid much attention to them, not even the Buddhists or the Christians. You humans, sometimes it's hard to imagine how you've made it this far.
I think that is a brilliant quote for whoever wrote this. Brilliant quote, because it's point to the fact, right? We believe as a human race, most of us believe in that eye for an eye thing. Life for a life. And that's stupid.
And it's going to keep cycling. You killed my dad, so I'm going to kill your dad. Oh, you killed my aunt. And it just cycles, and it's so bloody. Oh. Anyway.
Yep. But that's human nature. I love that. You humans. It's a wonder how you've gotten this far. And it's very true. Whoa, I'm seeing network things closing out. Anyway. Yeah. So all that being said, I am not here to convince you one way or another. If you are a religious person, more power to you. If you're not a religious person, more power to you as well. My point is this. It is up to you to decide what and who you believe in, what and how you believe, and just to know that just because you believe it doesn't mean I'm going to believe it, doesn't mean they're going to believe it. Be that one person who can believe what you believe, but be open enough to other people. You don't have to argue with them. I've seen so many videos on the internet. And by the way, I think they're pretty damn funny. But there's a lot of really confused people out there. And they're very, very eager and willing to believe whatever somebody is going to tell them. And they can put that in the name of God, under Jesus's name, under whoever you want to call it. That doesn't mean it's right.
And I think a lot of these people that quote unquote preach this, Jesus said it was wrong or whatever, Allah said it was wrong or says it's wrong, have never read the full book that they are quoting from and don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a thing that you see a lot in people, is that you go to church, you listen to the homily, which is when the priest gets up there and gives you a couple of quotes and then tells you what it's supposed to be about. But if you don't take that into context, you can really distort that.
Definitely.
You know, Jesus said, thou shalt, or well, actually Jesus didn't say that. God said that to Moses, right? The 10 Commandments. I like what you said there, Soul. I think we'd be all a lot happier if we just, us relaxing, setting our differences aside and focused on trying to help each other. My personal thing on that, I would really like to have the fucking politicians just decide the war in a room. We don't need to expend our troops. You know?
Settle it like they did in the old days where
give them a fucking gun, put them in a room and say the last person that comes out wins.
That'd be nice.
Yes, I agree. Humanity has their heads so far up their ass they can't see anything that's happening. And we get into this, and again, this whole channel is about bringing knowledge, bringing alternate views rather than what the media is telling you. We're going to talk next time about the U.S. education system and how it's failing us. I mean, we used to be number one in the world in education. Now I don't even know if we're on that list. Yeah, exactly. War is just delaying the fact that everybody needs to just sit the fuck down, chill the fuck out, and talk, you know? And I can get down into the politics side of that and say, you know what? People are just dumb. I'm just going to leave it at that. If we looked out for the human race as much as we looked out for ourselves, I think we'd all be a lot happier. But
there was a video from somebody I follow on Facebook that was talking about the Row Your Boat song and how basically, row your boat. You can't, row somebody else's boat for them. You can't live their life for them. And, you can always try to give them directions to the next waypoint, to the next dock, but you can't actually take them there. You can't lead the...
You can't lead the horse, or you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That's the essentials of that, yeah.
And I think too many people are like, oh, I know exactly how this needs to be done. You have to do it this way. And it doesn't work that way. I'm sorry.
No. And, again, we mentioned this in a previous episode. What works for me doesn't necessarily work for you, and doing energy work or whatever. It's all one of those things where it's you, it's about you. And since we are all of the same material, we need to break off from this deception that we're all disconnected and actually connect with people. Like, I am a techie. I love technology, but I also see that it has separated man from his neighbor, man from anybody. I mean, when I was growing up, you could go outside and play until dark or even thereafter, and not worry about anything. Nowadays, it's rare to see a kid outside. I mean, the only time you do is if their internet's out or they don't have the means to sit there and play video games all day. So,
hey, I'm inviting a few people over to look at their phones. You want to come?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great meme or whatever you want to call it, is where, you have a group of friends meeting up and they're all sitting at their house and they're all staring at their cell phones trying to figure out what to do. Doritos and mac and cheese is good, man. All right. With that being said, like I said, next week we are going to be talking about the U.S. education system and how it is failing us miserably, and how it's indoctrinating us into a society of slavery. Yes, slavery still exists, and actually more so now than it ever did before. So we'll probably hang around here for a little bit in the chat room, and we'll talk to you guys for a little while. But I am going to go ahead and call this show pretty much done. If you have anything, by all means, shoot us an email, show@taboo.media. Join us on the website, taboo.media. By all means, we have all sorts of information on that site. Give us a call, 970-999-5176. You can Skype us at the Arrow Radio. Gosh, am I missing anything? Chat rooms, phone. Yeah. So with that in mind, I do want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Thank you for everybody in the chat rooms. I'm sorry I missed some of your comments because one of the chat rooms apparently isn't giving its information to me. But you guys have a great, great evening. Thank you for joining. How do you like that one? Yeah, we're still here. We're doing some after party stuff. This isn't really a party. I should actually go check on food, huh?
You should. I can sit here for a minute though.
Okay, I'll be back.
Sweet. But yeah, so as you probably guessed, our goal is to also spark thought in people because, you know, it seems that people have become sheeple. And it's just absolutely disgusting in my mind, maybe, that, you know, they're so blind to thinking for themselves, not even blind to a particular thing, to just, you know, oh, I'm going to follow the crowd. That whole bandwagon bullshit. And no, here at Taboo, we are not afraid to use language. I also liked your comment about fuck politics. Totally agree myself. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be better to dissolve the federal stuff and go back to small town stuff where people can do them without having to worry about higher ups, like back in the Old West where people solve their own problems. But that's a story for another day. But we're very glad that you decided to join us, Soul. And definitely some good content there. And it just, my biggest thing is people need to think for themselves.
Sheeple. Man. You know what? We could always play games. Yeah, I don't want to play games tonight, though. It's almost 9 o'clock, and I got to get up early tomorrow.
Don't we both?
Anyway. All right. Well, ladies and germs, you guys have a great evening. And again, thank you for watching. We are live every Monday at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. So depending on where you live, please, do the math. I know math, it's hard. I don't like it either. But every Monday, 7 p.m. And you can always go to Taboo Media, taboo.media, and check us out there as well, old shows and stuff. And I want to thank you once again for joining us. You guys have a great night.
There's music for everyone. Number one.
You're jamming with 106.9 The Arrow. The best music, period.
You want to be a part of the panel? Now you can. Join the conversation anytime we live stream by sending us a message in the chat rooms or messaging us on Skype. Send a message to the Arrow Radio on Skype and you can join in. Or you can send us an email to show@taboo.media and let us know what's on your mind. Don't want to use your computer? No problem. Give us a call at 970-999-5176 and talk to us live or leave us a message to be played on the air. Join us today. Taboo and 106.9 The Arrow. We're not afraid. Hello, ladies and germs, or gentlemen, as the case may be. You might be germs, I don't know. It's me, it is Zan. I am here with Alex. Say hello, Alex.
Hello, Alex.
And you are watching Taboo, or listening, depending on where you're at. I wanted to let you guys know that this is going to be a longer than normal episode, and hello to whoever's in the room. Or in the videos, or listening on 106.9 The Arrow. This is going to be a longer than normal episode, mainly because it covers a topic that's very serious. Hey, Smooth, how's it going? thank you for the ice cream already. I could use some about it now. But we're covering things like toxic relationships and domestic violence. So why is this going to be longer than the normal episodes? Quite simply, it's a pretty serious topic. I mean, it's a very serious topic. But it's also one, I did a dry run, the other night, and it took just me, an hour and a half. And that was without anything that Alex had to say. So I'm sure this is going to be a little lengthier type of situation. But yeah, we do want to talk about domestic violence, toxic relationships. I think pretty much everybody listening and anybody around the world has probably heard it, been in one, had a friend who was in one. It's bad.
It really is. It's traumatic. It's very traumatic for at least the victims. I don't know about the abusers, and I don't know if it was what causes them to be the abuser, but yeah, it's traumatic to say the least.
Well, and some of that, I mean, it's really hard to say what causes a person to become abusive. Upbringing is to blame in about 90% of them. If you look at even, domestic violence, toxic relationship, it's one step away from serial killer, in my opinion. Just because, okay, let me preface this. Everybody gets mad sometimes. That's okay. It's how you handle it. You don't need to go hitting, punching, pulling hair, biting, kicking, screaming, throwing things, et cetera, et cetera. It kind of hits home. I think, like I said, I think everybody listening or watching has either been in one or known somebody who was in some form of toxic relationship. So we're going to start off just kind of with a little preface of everything that we're going to talk about. Toxic relationships, of course. What are they? Are you in one? We'll discuss things of the nature of how the signs to see if you are in an actual toxic relationship. How to spot the signs of an abuser. This could be boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, neighbor, relative, stranger. And then how you get out of a toxic relationship, which is sometimes easier said than done. We'll go into some stories. And we'll also talk a little bit about how you can heal from a toxic relationship. So if at any time you guys have anything to say, please jump in. Feel free to give us a call to go live on the air with us. Also, I do want to mention that if you or somebody you know is in a domestic violence or a toxic relationship and needs to talk to somebody, please, by all means, call the national hotline. It's 1-800-799-7233. And get the help that you need. Okay. Give me one quick second here because it seems like something isn't right. The screen seems awfully small today, and I'm not sure why. So go ahead and talk for a minute, Alex.
Yeah, I can definitely say with a 110% surety, I have definitely been in one. I'm just glad it's been limited to one. Now, granted, it was 9 years worth, which, again, as you mentioned just a couple minutes ago, getting out of toxic relationships is definitely easier said than done. Just for a multitude of variety of reasons. It can be so many reasons. Threats, guilt.
Oh, we'll get into all of that here in a little bit. First off, I want to explain what a toxic relationship actually is. And this is the very definition of a toxic relationship. So I'm just going to read this really quickly. A toxic relationship is any relationship that is unfavorable to you or to others. The foundations of any relationship, healthy or not, are most commonly established upon a mutual admiration and respect, but it can in time become remarkably unhealthy. Now, pardon me. It is the poisonous atmosphere that distinguishes a merely bad or troublesome relationship from a toxic relationship. Toxic relationships can prevent those involved from living a productive, healthy life. A toxic relationship can be caused by two polar opposite personality types. The toxicity is caused by an incompatibility of the persons involved in relationships. In some cases, there is no one necessarily to blame for the toxicity. Rather, the toxicity, boy, I say that fast, is caused by the inability to communicate and establish healthy boundaries, conversation, and communication. I think a lot of toxic type relationships actually start with poor communication. I believe I'm a very firm believer in communication in relationships, and the one that I have been in, and we'll get into that in the story section later on, but I believe it was mainly the communication aspect that had broken down, and it became a very unhealthy type relationship. Oh, look, there's my headline. What is a toxic relationship? All right. So let's move on to signs. Signs that you're in a toxic relationship. And there's a lot of them because there's different levels of abuse or toxicity in a relationship. But these are kind of the 5 top overwhelmingly common ones. Number 1, it feels bad a lot or all the time. And what I mean by that is you feel hollow going to bed, and even worse when you're waking up. Again, this is a dead ringer for needs not being met. You know, there's some aspect of that relationship that isn't met. So you feel hollow or empty all or most of the time. You also feel bad when you see others being lovey with each other. And I'm sure all of us can agree that when we've been in a relationship of any time that wasn't meeting our needs, toxic or not, you know, you see that old couple holding hands and you're like, wow, that's what I want to be. Or in this case, if you're in a toxic relationship, you look at that same thing and you're like, I wonder if he hits her or him. You know, that is one thing I do want to mention too, that toxic relationships are not limited to women. Neither is domestic abuse. It's, you know, transgender, if you will. It can be men or women who are the victims in a toxic relationship. Also, you know, there's those feelings of jealousy when you see other couples. But part 2, if you will, of the 5 is you're always waiting for that other shoe to drop. And I know, Alex, you and I have talked about this a little off air, and you were mentioning this when we were going through this too the other day.
Yeah, you're kind of always on edge with this one. It's like, what is the next time that, you know, yeah, you can see it coming as it says on the screen, but it's like, when is the next time he or she is gonna just like go off the deep end? What is the next thing I'm doing wrong?
Yeah. And like it says, sometimes you can see it coming, like, oh crap, you know, I went out and spent $20 on a shirt for myself. They're going to kill me. But there's other times that you had no idea it was going to happen. And this can be anything, you know, a bad day at work can trigger this kind of experience. There's so many times where I've either had friends or I've heard of stories from people that, you know, say, yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea he was going to go off on such a little thing. Or I had no idea she would, you know, like sit there and yell at me in a restaurant because I ordered something she didn't like. You know, it's just really weird how it all works. You also want to be avoid of traps. And by that, it's the old saying, oh, would you rather go out with Jane Doe or do you want to stay here with me?
That seems to me like an insecurity on their part. They know, in a sense, whether it's subconscious or not, that they're not treating you as well as you should be treated. And then they see it like, oh, if I, you know, they're probably not happy with me. Would you rather go, you know, see someone else, or do you want to stay? And to me, that just screams that they're insecure and they know that they're doing something wrong in a sense.
Well, and I think a lot of it stems from insecurities. But I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right with this one. They're insecure, or they, use language like this, well, you really seem to be having fun enjoying that talk to Bill earlier.
What, I can't have friends other than you? Seriously?
Exactly. And we get into that a little bit more too. But yeah, it seems like a lot of people, I'm not going to exclude myself from any of this because I know I've said those things. I didn't mean it in a bad way. Rather, like in more recent times, I've used, oh, well, you're going to go out with them, huh? And I'm just kind of poking at the person's past, not necessarily the current situation. To sum this one up, you constantly feel stupid, worthless, on edge, full of anxiety, full of just fear, and I know we went into fear a little bit, and we'll probably hit that in another episode later on, but fear is a control mechanism. It's always been a control mechanism. So one of the things that abusers do is they make you feel afraid, worthless, stupid. And I equate this to the old saying that, if you believe you're blonde enough, you'll become stupid. Or if you believe or have heard so many times that you are stupid and worthless, you'll begin to believe it. And that's when the more damaging stuff tends to happen. Point 3. What's the point? By this, I mean your needs become unimportant to your partner. By needs, I mean you have, in any relationship, there are basic needs. Sex, connection, validation, appreciation, love, affection. And those are just the basic ones. I mean, people have other needs, like you need to have a place to stay, you need to have clothing, stuff like that. But these are more relationship centered: sex, connection, validation, appreciation, love, and affection. So let's talk about each of those in turn. Hey, Mommy, how are you doing? Good to see you. I don't know if you can hear me or if you're just listening to the stream or watching the stream, but what is the need for sex? Well, in any healthy relationship, there is going to be sex. And by that, I don't necessarily mean intercourse either, because there's a lot of teenagers and younger people that get into relationship type things. And sex doesn't necessarily mean that physical intercourse. It can mean physical affection, kissing, holding hands, etc., etc. Connection, you have to feel that connection between the people. And if that's missing, I think that's another place where a lot of things break down. One person isn't as into the other as the other one. Wow, that was kind of a conundrum, wasn't it? So like the guy doesn't necessarily love the girl as much as the girl loves the guy. Validation, instead of, validation quite simply is, I understand what you're saying and here's my thoughts. Or it's, I don't feel well. Okay, I understand you're not feeling well, so I'm going to do this for you. There's different levels of validation, but to validate the other person's feelings and emotions is huge. Welcome to the room. Appreciation. This is, please and thank you. That's pretty basic. I think we all get taught that. Well, at least we used to all get taught that when we were younger. I don't know so much about today's kids, but yeah.
And with the appreciation too, I think, please and thank yous are great, and I think they get overused though to an extent. So even, maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks, once a month, just going to the other person and saying, I may not say it enough, but I really do appreciate everything you do for me. I appreciate this. I appreciate that. Actually using the word appreciate can definitely make it
more meaningful. Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, I fixed your microphone. That was bugging me.
I appreciate that.
Love is a basal emotion. Love, hate, fear, et cetera, et cetera. We all need to feel loved. And I don't mean like the mom loves the child. I mean, on a deeper level, this is the kind of love where you're in a relationship with somebody, and it's really a combination of that connection, validation, and appreciation and affection. It's not so much saying, hey, I love you, because those words are very overused in most relationships and oftentimes unmeant.
Not understood by the people that say them either. They might think they love them, but their actions speak otherwise.
Exactly. Again, saying I love you doesn't mean it. It's the actions behind it. Affection is another one. You know, I hit on this one earlier. Kissing, touching, holding hands, you know, back rubs. It doesn't necessarily even need to be that, but staring into your loved one's eyes can do amazing things for your relationship. So another thing, when you feel kind of what's the point, and by that I mean you're given empty promises that ends in a fight. You're being told you're needy, jealousy, insecurity, or downright madness. And we'll get into those a little bit more in the part where we actually explain the different types of abuses, but
of course everyone's needy. We have needs.
Well, we all have needs, yes. But this is like you're in a fight or an argument and the other person is like, God, you're needy. Ugh. You know, again, it goes back and makes you feel bad about yourself. And again, these things generally tend to stem from the jealousy and insecurity of the other person. Or you just feel like there's no goddamn point to anything. It doesn't mean necessarily the relationship, but you could get into that state of depression where you are just totally and completely blah.
No point in showering, no point in going to work. It's just disgusting.
Exactly.
Feeling. It really is.
Bringing up number 4. I almost said 5. Number 4 is the scorecard, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with. Guys hear about this all the time where, you know, the woman is going to come back and bring something up from 10 years ago that they thought was completely over, and it's totally not. So here's the thing. We all make mistakes. Even the most loving, committed partner does something stupid and hurtful at some point in time. It happens. We all do it. You know, like, oh, get off of me. Go away. You know, sometimes we need that alone time or the space. However, when it's brought up over and over and over and over again, it slowly kills even the most healthiest relationship out there. If I'm to sit here and I say over and over again that, you know, I don't like the way you do your makeup, or I don't like the way you don't take out the trash, or I don't like the way you leave shit lying around. Over and over and over, no matter what the healthiest relationship, it is still going to wear it down. Again, these are all control mechanisms that make you feel inferior. Firing shots at one at one or another is a control mechanism. You know, again, going back to, hey, why do you always leave your clothes on the floor? Well, you know, that's one step away from saying, hey, pick your shit up, but it's also a control mechanism. You're being oddly silent.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the story side.
These things are, again, designed to shame and manipulate the other person. Take the garbage out, do the dishes, you know, whatever. It can be meaningful tasks or meaningless tasks, you know. And we get into a lot more of this here in a little bit.
And there's so many ways you could just rearrange that sentence to make it so much nicer. It's like, hey, if you've got time, could you please do this?
Oh, exactly.
And then all of a sudden, there's no issue with it. It's like, okay, yeah, I'll do that if I have time.
Yeah. Yeah. Number 5 is the mine is always worse column. And what I mean by that is like, whatever you're going through, I have it worse. So you're having a bad day. Oh my God, you should have heard what I had to deal with today. It was so terrible.
The abusers always seem to turn themselves into the victim.
In some way, yeah. And again, it stems from the insecurities that they have. In a healthy relationship, both people need to take a turn at being supported and being the supporter. That's just how it is. But if the focus is always on the other person, like, I know you're really sick, but it's so stressful for me to have to deal with this stuff.
Or, I know you've got a fever of 102, but I still expect you to clean the house.
Exactly. Same thing. Nothing ever gets resolved in an argument. All couples argue. I don't know what just happened there. That was weird. All couples argue, and there is no trust that the other will be able to deal with the issue, or there is no trust. Okay, so see, this is the problem with me doing stuff when I'm awake as opposed to talking about it when I'm not so much. So nothing ever gets resolved and everything always ends in an argument. All couples do argue. You know, it's how you argue that makes the difference. Hey, Leah.
It all goes back to the communication and the ability to communicate effectively. You can say, hey, I know you're stressed, but, you know, I feel like, and using the I statements, and this is going back to elementary school, the I statements always, to me at least, seem better instead of pointing the finger and saying, you never do this. You're always sucking
Absolutely.
at that. It's like, hey, I know it's stressful right now, but if, you know, I feel like, and then whatever's bothering you, that's less likely to turn into a shouting contest.
Well, and we'll get into some of that too a little bit later when we get into the how to deal with stuff. But you're right on point on that. The I statements are very, very important. And by that, instead of saying, you make me feel like shit, you can say, exactly, narcissistic behavior. You can always say things like, I feel when I hear blah that I am feeling bad, you know. So I'll give an example here. So I feel whenever the house is dirty that I am worthless. That is putting the focus upon you, not the other person. So it doesn't put that person in such a defensive position. So that same thing in a bad way would be, this place always looks like shit. Why don't you clean it? Or I wish you would clean the house because it looks like shit, or anything like that. And like NY Girlie there says, narcissistic behavior for sure. And again, we're going to get into more of this stuff. But the result of all of this is that there's buried needs and resentment for the other person. And by that, I mean, you stop communicating what you need to be healthy, to be happy, to be in a meaningful relationship, and you begin to resent the other person.
Yep.
Pardon me. So there's many signs of an abuser. And a lot of it depends on what kind of abuse we're looking at. So we're going to go into various different types of abuse and kind of see where all these line up. So signs of physical abuse. These are pretty easy to see. Somebody hits you, somebody punches you, kicks you, shove you, choking and slapping. Well, you know, if you're not into that kind of thing, yeah, that can be a problem. Using weapons to threaten, you know, grabbing a kitchen knife and saying, I'm going to stab you, or, or even worse, pulling out a gun and say, I'm going to kill you, you know, controlling what you eat or when you sleep. Like, no, you can't go to bed until I do. I think you had mentioned that yesterday.
Yeah, my ex always used to get very, very pissed at me when I would be so tired that I ended up falling asleep before he did. It was, ugh.
That seems a bit silly to me, but yes, I mean that not to downplay that by any means. I just think that's a dumb reason for somebody to get upset.
Definitely. I thought it was pretty stupid.
Forcing you to do work against your will. You had mentioned the 102-degree fever and having to clean the house. Well, that's a bit on the not cool side. If somebody is that sick, let them rest, for God's sake. But you get the general idea, and that can be any kind of work. For example, I know people who disguise their abusive relationships or in BDSM type relationships, which we're not going in this episode, but, they make their partner work and then they take all the money. So,
oh yeah, very familiar with that too.
Forcing you to use drugs or alcohol. I've seen a lot of abuse type sufferers but turn to alcohol and or drugs as a means of escape. I get that, but it's when, if I'm shooting up heroin and I'm like, here, have some, and you're like, no, dude, and I force it on you, that's an abuse. Stopping you from seeking medical treatment or calling the cops. This one you hear about all the time. I started dialing 911. He slaps the phone out of my hand. I start dialing 911. She takes the phone and smashes it against the wall. Anytime that you are stopped from seeking medical treatment for a wound, a cut, it could be a burn, it could be a number of different things, or that you can't call the police for assistance, that's an issue. We'll go on. So signs of sexual abuse. Again, this is forcing or manipulating you to perform sexual acts. You had mentioned this one earlier as well.
Yeah. I've got a 9 years worth of experience with majority of this stuff, actually.
Well, and I believe in, forgive me for stealing your example, but him forcing you to have sex when you didn't want to. I mean, it's that simple.
Well,
or even the number 2 one there, which is more to the point, demanding sex when you're not willing or able.
Well, my thing is, I was sleeping 3 a.m. He wakes up with a freaking boner, part of my language.
And yeah, I'm offended.
And then wakes me up when I'm in the middle of probably my REM sleep cycle and I'm groggy, only half there, and pretty much demands me to get him off some way or another. And then if I'm that tired to the point where I'm just like, yeah, no, let me sleep, again, he would get seriously pissed.
Yeah. And we're hearing the sorry to hear that's in the chat room.
I appreciate that. It was years ago, and thank God I figured a way to get out of it. So yay.
Exactly. That's the important thing right there. Next is, harming you during sex by choking, holding, or striking you. I think this goes further into blood play, cutting you, biting you to the point where you're bleeding, scratching you so hard that you're bleeding, whatever that is. And again, that's if you're not into it, just because if you're into it and your boyfriend or girlfriend is into it, more power to you. But this is a generalization. Forcing you to watch pornography is another sign of sexual abuse. Some people are into it. Some people aren't. Respect their boundaries. You have to be able to set those.
I want you to watch this so you can learn to do it better.
Yeah, that's another good one. And then insulting your sexual ways. God, you can't give head. Or God, you can't eat pussy. Or, whatever the case is, you fuck like a 2-year-old. Okay. Well, how do you know what a 2-year-old fucks like? First off, and 2, that's gross. But you get the point here, people. You're not. Yeah, they're just insulting the way that you perform or have sex.
Why can't you do this better?
Yeah. Why can't you learn how to get me off this way or whatever? And then we have psychological abuse. In my opinion, this is probably the worst type of abuse. And I say that only because physical wounds will heal in time. Scars, maybe not so much, but the majority of physical abuse will fade after time.
Bruises will go away. The muscles will heal themselves. That used to be my mindset on it. You know, I'd rather he hit me than give me all kinds of emotional and psychological abuse, because actually, you know what? The wound's healed. Pain goes away. This shit doesn't.
Yeah, this is the stuff that sticks with you, and this is why it's so hard to get over. Signs are threatening to hurt you, your loved ones, your pets, your children, your Xbox, you know, whatever the case might be. Okay. That's pretty straightforward. They say, you know, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your parents. I'm going to kill your kid. I'm going to kill, whatever the case might be. I'm going to blow up your car. I'm going to make you destitute. You know, any of that kind of stuff.
Seems like a pretty good reason for me to stay. I mean, you're going to kill my family. Okay. Yeah, I'll stay with you.
Well, and that is kind of the mindset. You know, you want to protect those you love, your kids, your parents, your family, whatever the case might be. So yeah, you don't want them to do that kind of stuff. Yeah, Leah here in one of the chat rooms says she had social anxiety and wanted to start working again, but she had a boyfriend who kept telling her that she can't work for 3 years. He said that I would not be able to handle it. Gotcha. Yeah, and that's right along the same thing. It's like you're belittling, or he, in this case, Leah, is belittling you. So I totally understand that. Another form of psychological abuse is controlling the time that you spend with others or monitoring where you go. Who in this world hasn't had somebody that's like, where you been? Where'd you go? What'd you do? How come you didn't text me for 5 minutes? You know, I mean, I don't know what exactly people think people can do in 5 minutes, but hey.
Your friends have to be our friends. You can't have any friends of your own.
Yeah, that you can't go out on your own. You can't, you know, it's ridiculous. But we've all had those people in our lives. And, you know, in most cases and in most relationships, you know, the one person is going to say to the other, what difference does it make? Leave me the fuck alone, or, you know, see ya. But again, we're talking about an abuser and an abusee here. So this becomes a problem. They control not only the time that you spend with others, like you can no longer go out with your friends. You can no longer go to the store by yourself. You know, it doesn't matter. Or if you do, you have to know, hey, I have to text this person. I have to call them, let them know every second of what I'm doing. Another sign is controlling what you wear. I see this a lot with guys who are with women, obviously, but the accusation is that you'll attract too much attention. Damn, honey, why are you going out looking all good like that? You're going to get all these guys to be talking to you. What are you doing that for? Do you want them to like hit on you? You know, that kind of stuff.
Who are you getting all good looking for?
Yeah, exactly.
Excuse me?
Yeah, and Michelle mentions on Facebook, what did you spend money on? Accounting down to the last penny. Yep, exactly. And we hit that here, I believe, next maybe. Oh, yeah, here's a good one. Damaging or stealing your belongings. I'm not talking for crack. I'm just talking to hurt you.
Oh, you hurt my feelings. I'm going to punch a hole in your Xbox.
Yeah, Leah, we get into that one too. She says, same boyfriend at the time also said, if I leave him, I'll not survive. And he meant it, that he would go and do something stupid. We hit both of those. That's another sign of psychological abuse, is the whole person who says, you know, I can't live without you, you know, and brings you back in with that guilt trip.
Oh, the guilt trips are the worst. Oh, but adding on to what Leah's saying there too, my ex told me that if I left him, A, no one would ever put up with my shit the way he does, and B, I'd never find anyone else like him.
Well, and you know, we can hope for both. That's all I got to say. You know, if you're in a relationship and somebody uses that lame shit, please, by all means, tell them I hope so. Because A, you're saying, I hope there's nobody else like you out there. And I hope other people will put up with my shit without this kind of crap. Okay, but we'll get into that later. The other one I love on this one, right, is they blame you for the abuse, saying that you deserve it, or why are you making me do this? Why do you always, they use those you statements. Those you statements put you on the defensive, anybody.
Why do you always push my buttons? You know exactly how to make me mad.
Exactly. And that's going to put me on the defensive. So those kind of things, or blaming you for the abuse. I've seen this a lot, especially in more of the violent type domestic violence situations where the guy, and forgive me, I haven't seen the physical violence as bad in women on men as it is men on women, but I know it exists. So when I say this, I'm just using male and female as a transitive kind of thing. When he hits her, she hits him, and they say, why do you make me do this? Like you're punishing a dog for pooping on the carpet kind of thing.
So wouldn't hit a dog for that either, but hey.
Yeah, well. The other thing I want to mention here is gaslighting, making you question your reality. That's what gaslighting is, in case you didn't know. And it's like, that didn't happen that way, or you never remember correctly, making you think that what you remember or what you did or what you saw was not what you saw. This is made famous in that one song, It Wasn't Me. Who's that, Shaggy? Have you ever heard that?
I ever heard that.
I'll have to play that later for you, but
yeah, gaslighting is always
it's
fun
like,
too.
She came in, she saw him doing it on the counter. Oh, wasn't me. On the sofa. Oh, wasn't me. All these things where she saw it, and he sits there and he says, no, that wasn't me. It never happened that way. That's bullshit. You're remembering incorrectly. It wasn't me. It was somebody else. Really? Okay. But it makes you question. Yeah, exactly. It makes you question your reality to the point where you're like, well, maybe I didn't happen that way. So that's another great sign of psychological abuse.
I realize y'all can't see I'm rolling my eyes, but believe me, it's happening.
Mommy loves that song, she says. Is it Shaggy? I don't remember. I think it's Shaggy, but it might not be. So signs of emotional abuse. Again, this one and psychological are, in my mind, the worst of the worst, because these scars don't necessarily go away easily without years of therapy. Yes, it is Shaggy. Okay, cool. Sorry, I had to sidetrack that there. So signs of emotional abuse: attacking your sense of self-worth. Again, you're stupid. You're fucking worthless. You're a piece of shit.
You can't do anything.
You can't do anything right. Why can't you do this correctly? Who the fuck taught you how to do this? You're an idiot.
How old are you?
Yeah. Those things, again, all these things are control mechanisms, but these are the worst, right? Because then after so long, you begin believing these kind of things, and they end up scarring deeper and deeper and deeper into you. Insulting you, calling you names, criticizing you, humiliating you. We see these all the time. God, you're stupid bitch, fucking whore, criticizing you, you suck. So many deep ones there. And then humiliating you, I do want to mention, as I saw this actually in what was that? That was I want to say it was at Chili's or something like that years ago. This guy had taken his wife and kid out to it was either a Chili's or an Applebee's. I don't remember which. But one of the kids spilt their soda on the mom while she was trying to feed him. It was a little baby or something, somewhere like 2-3 years old, whatever. The guy stood her up and ripped her shirt off and said, "That's how you treat the shit that I buy you?" And that's always stuck with me. That is just ridiculous.
Really?
But it's very humiliating. I mean, imagine being the woman, right? You're in this fucking busy restaurant. Of course, I don't know. It wasn't too busy. I guess it was an afternoon kind of lunch deal. But at any rate, there's strangers around and somebody rips your shirt off. Like literally, it was a button down type shirt, and he just ripped it off of her. And, she's standing there in her bra. And I mean, she looked petrified.
What an ass.
So things like that, acting jealous or possessive or accusing you with being other partners. You know, I think everybody sees this at some point, whether it's playing or not. It's like, you went out with what's his name? You fucking him? Why are you fucking this person? Who are you going out to see? You know, those kind of things.
That's just annoying.
Or not, again, this goes back to others not letting you go out, controlling where you go, et cetera, et cetera. Withholding affection or acknowledgement in order to punish you.
You pissed me off.
You ain't getting no dick. But I've seen that. It's more, I see that more women towards men than men towards women, at least in the sexual realm. Now, affection in general could just be, you know, pushing them away, not giving them the kiss, not holding hands in public, not doing, you know, whatever that might be. But withholding that affection or acknowledgement, even like they exist, you know, walking around like literally you don't see them, in an effort to punish you. It's kind of like the silent treatment on steroids.
And I'd like to add to that withholding affection. Now, I've also seen in some instances when the victim is feeling so down, so depressed because of how they're being treated, they're likely to not want to give affection, mainly because they are not feeling it because the person's an asshole.
Well, I think that's a little bit different than what we're saying here. This is on the realm of the abuser to the abusee side.
Yeah, but then if they do withhold that affection because they're depressed because of how they're being treated, an abuser is likely to turn the tables and say, well, you're not doing this, so why should I, no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we're hearing these all in here. Best to leave, yes, best to leave. Get the fuck out, et cetera, et cetera. Also cheating on you intentionally. Now, I know a lot of women see this more than men. I think it's because men don't equate sex with love as much as women do. And I get that, I get that, not just like, oh, hey, I get that, I'm going to go cheat on somebody. But I get that in the realm of, for a woman, sex is a more intimate thing. I mean, something is being put inside of you typically. And that's a little more intimate than, just pounding one out. So I get that, but I see this a lot more men doing to women where they're like, well, you won't clean the house, so I'm going to go fuck somebody else. Makes perfect sense, right? Completely logical.
Loads.
So then how does that make you feel? That makes you feel like shit. The guy that you care about or the girl that you care about has just done this to you. It's all emotional abuse. Lying to you is another thing. Again, we can go back to Shaggy and the wasn't me thing.
The gaslighting, you don't remember it, right? I never said that. You never told me that. It's a downright lie.
Yeah. Or, comes home with lipstick on the collar. What happened? Oh, I don't know. Somebody, gave me a hug earlier. Must have done that. Whatever. Don't lie to me. That's fucking stupid. So how do you get out of a toxic relationship?
With extreme care?
Yeah.
I
But
realize it's a generalization, but
there's a lot of thought about what is best, how is best to do it. And depending on where you go, there's a number of different ways. But first and foremost, you need to decide that you want to leave, period. And brings me to my next point. Nobody can make you leave if you don't actually want it and want it to happen. So I know of a lot of women who have been in physically violent relationships who say they want to leave, but they never take that next step, which has always baffled me. It's like, this guy's a complete asshole to you and you don't want to leave. Why? So it's very hard for the abusee to leave. So the key to a healthy relationship is knowing your worth and your value and not letting your partner define it for you.
And sometimes charging interest on that value too.
I would say so. I am the shit. You fucking need to respect that. The other thing that you need to do is do what you need to take care of yourself. So there's various trains of thought on this. You know, you can start by doing affirmations to yourself. I am not a piece of shit. I am worthy. I am lovable. I am, you know, spectacular, whatever it takes to make you feel better about yourself. Now, unless it is a physical abusive relationship, it can take time to get your mindset out of the I am a worthless piece of shit.
Even if it is physical, it can take some time, especially if the threats, the psychological aspect of it are towards people other than yourselves. Like
your kids.
Your kids, your family, your siblings.
Mm-hmm.
That can also add it to take time, because if you're afraid that leaving this person is going to result in your family getting killed, I'm sorry. No.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to say don't rush it, but sometimes you have to. But the biggest part is that you have to decide that you are going to leave. That's the first and biggest thing right there, is that you have to decide that you're going to leave and you're going to cut off all contact with them, which is my next point. When you do, you cut all contact. Delete their not their social media, but your connection to their social media pages. Take their phone number, block it, block their text messages, block their email address, whatever it takes. You need to get the fuck away from these I can't talk today. These people. And why? Because they will lure you back.
Guilt trips are great like that.
Every time. They will try to lure you back, and they'll do it in a number of ways. I'm going to kill myself if you don't come back. Well, shit, that just puts a whole lot of stress on me if this fucker dies. Does it? You could be like, okay, just do it over the sink so I don't have to clean it up.
Well, guilt trips are seriously effective on so many levels.
They are. And it's because you are in that state of mind where you already have been beaten down, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, whatever. You have been beaten down to the point where you still love this person, right? You still care about the person, but they are no good for you. And it's easy to bring somebody back into that relationship that still cares, still loves. And I'm not saying that you have to say, you know, fuck you, I hate you, I hope you die. Although that may be the case, you don't have to react that way. Ultimately, in any situation, you are in control. And I say that because you might not be able to control how person X acts towards you, but you are 100% in control of how you react to it. And that's the key. Join a support group. You know, if you're still with that person, tell them that you're going to therapy. 9 times out of 10, an abuser does not want to go with you to that. It's true. If you're an abuser, and I don't think anybody in here is, but we've all had those abusive relationships. If you're in an abusive situation, that is one way to get them to let you go out. I need to go to therapy. Now,
I need to work on myself. They'll
yeah,
be like,
well,
yeah, you do.
and I mean, you can phrase that in different ways. I want to be better for you. Oh, really? All right, go. Do the dishes when you get home, bitch. You know, it's that kind of mentality. They won't want to go. You could always ask them, hey, do you want to go to therapy with me? Oh, hell no. There's also a massive amount of strength in your friends. When you do decide to leave, there are things that freak us the fuck out, right? Where am I going to live? How am I going to live? What am I going to pay bills with? Do I have bills? I don't know. I've been paying this other person's bills for so long. I don't know if any of them are actually mine.
Imagine that.
But you need to contact your friends. Let them know the situation. 9 times out of 10, if you need to get out of a physically abusive relationship, there is at least one of your friends that is like, get your ass over here now. You go, you don't look back. Take what you need for like 3 to 5 days and get the fuck out of there.
And I know in my experience, the few friends that I talked to about my situation before I decided to leave, every last one of them said, really? I would never have guessed. But as soon as that shock wore off, they're like, you need to do what's right for you. Screw him.
Yep, exactly. I'm having a problem with the 1069, the arrow at the moment. It's not connecting for some strange ass reason. Anyway, so who knows if we're actually live on there, but we are everywhere else. But yeah, there's going to be strength in your friends. Count on that. You know, don't use your friends by any means, but definitely they will help you. Yeah. Leah here says, I contacted my father who I didn't talk to in a year, sucked it up to ask for help to get out. Best thing I ever did for myself. And I bet you, Leah, he was there in a heartbeat, wasn't he? I'll bet you he was. Because when you're in these abusive relationships, the abuser will cut you off from the support systems that you have.
Yeah. And
every time.
Yep. He wanted me to be all inclusive with his family, despite the fact that, quote unquote, I was family now. No, I'm sorry. That's a mistake. But, you know, his mom, his brothers, his grandma were all living with us at one point, and I had to be all inclusive of them. They were his family. But let me try and vent to anyone in my family. Oh, who are you talking to about me behind my back? What? You go to your family, and I have to include your family, but my family is off limits?
Yeah. And again, that's the first step in being an abuser too, is that you want to cut them off from the world. Their friends, family, whoever. Get them out of their supportive situation so that you can take them over. Yeah, and Leah says, yes, he was. I left half of my belongings behind to get out fast. And you may have to. Like I said, take 3 outfits.
I took a duffel bag. That was it.
Yeah. Take 3 outfits, a pair of shoes, what you have on your body, and get the fuck out if you can. It's harder when you have kids because your kids don't understand the situation. They don't understand, you know, I'm going to use mommy and daddy. They don't understand mommy and daddy are fighting. They don't understand why mommy and daddy are fighting. They don't understand the situation, but that's okay. Still get them out of it for their own protection as well. Last thing here, don't take him or her back. That is the worst possible thing you can do. Everybody that I know of who has gotten out and then takes them back ends up getting worse. And there's statistics about this. I meant to pull them up for this, but I don't have them handy. But I do know a great number of the ones that go back end up dead.
Yeah, because their exes or significant others that are the abusers are so pissed that they even remotely thought about leaving. They punish them for it. It's stupid.
Exactly. They'll play the sad puppy dog eyes long enough to get you back into their life, and it gets exponentially worse. So whatever you do, please, for the love of God, don't take them back. So here we got story time. I know Alex has a bunch of stories, and I'm going to let her take the floor and tell you all kind of the whole situation that she had. Once she's done, then I'll come back and tell you about my former situation, which, yeah, we'll just get into that later. But Alex, go ahead, man. The floor is yours.
Sweet, thanks. So yeah, when I was just coming into adulthood, some crap happened in my life, and this was before I met my ex, but from as best I can tell right now, my subconscious was crying out for a friend, for anybody that could remotely make me feel better about myself. And I played RuneScape online. It was fun. It took my mind off things. And I met my ex on this game. Lived all the way across the country from me. But we seemed to have a lot in common. We were, great at making each other feel better. And then, so about a year after that friendship started, he came out to meet me and my family. And for that week, everything was great. And then I got a plane ticket to go out and meet his family. It was a round trip ticket. Very disgusted in myself that I did not use the other half of it. But everything for the 2 weeks was amazing. We were like really happy. And so I didn't use that other side of the round trip ticket. Ended up living with this guy for 9 years. Again, wish it hadn't lasted that long. But hey, you live and you learn. But as I mentioned, everything for him was family, family, family. And if I bought a bag of chips from the store to split with him, his family would get super pissed if I didn't buy anything for them. So that kind of was irritating in and of itself. But, you're inclusive. I like that. You're family oriented. I like that. So things go on. And after about a year is when things started getting physical. When he got mad, he would get, start slapping, start choking, whatnot. And I did. I wanted to leave after about a year and a half of being with him. I tried. I got so far as probably 2 towns away. And I made the mistake of not cutting off contact. Get a call, guilt trips me into coming back. Actually ended up calling the cops on my parents because they wouldn't let me go back. And that was, I'm an adult. They can't hold me against my will. Worst decision of my life. But it went on cycles. We were good for a year and a half sometimes. And then I would get to the point where I wanted to leave. And it cycled. Guilt trip every time.
So how did he guilt trip you back in the first place?
The I'm sorry. It was all my fault. It won't happen again.
So he used the it's all your fault or
No,
all his fault?
It was all his fault.
Okay.
It's all my fault. It won't happen again. I need you. I'm going through some stuff right now and I won't be able to get through it without you. And then progressively the guilt trips got worse. About halfway through the 4.5, 5 year mark, I wanted to leave. And it was, I will kill your parents. And while this would have been extremely difficult because they're halfway across the country at this point, it still resonated. I'm like, you've already gotten really physical with me. I'm inclined to believe you at this point. And, and I would go numb for periods at a time, months at a time.
You mean emotionally?
Emotionally numb, yes. I would cut off all my feelings. I would just be about as emotionless as a rock so that I couldn't get hurt repeatedly. And then I would get really tired of being numb. I'd turn my emotions back on. And, life goes on. And then also, then it turned into the problem of, I want you to hold your tongue so that I don't have to worry about you and my family fighting. Well, first of all, let us get our own place, kick them the fuck out, and we'll be fine.
So you lived with his
mother. And his mother was, I'm sorry, the world's biggest bitch. She was always right, whether she was right or not. Seemed to pass that on to him, too. But so I swallowed all of my feelings. If she berated me, which she did regularly, I would just hold it in. I wouldn't say anything. I'd go in my room. I'd disappear, whatever. But that well of patience, as it were, all those bottled up emotions eventually bubbled up over the top and I'd snap. But every time I'd snap, I was the bad guy. It was always my fault. I'm imagining things. Gaslighting.
Wow.
Imagine that, right? And so usually at that point, I'd turn off my emotions and be like, you know what, fuck it. And then finally, at the very end, I had family that was getting married, and I made it very well known that I was taking a vacation and I was going out to this wedding. And what I didn't tell them is that I wasn't using the other half of that round trip ticket to go see the wedding. I was just going to take, what would fit on the airplane and not come back. However, that's not quite how it played out. I realized, oh crap, I have family right down the road, about 35 miles down the road. What's going to happen to them if I just disappear? Because, again, the threat's about family. The threat's about if you ever leave me, I'm going to kill them. And so I called up my family, let them know my thoughts on the matter, and that I was very much scared for them if I just got up and left. And everyone wanted me to leave for the longest time. But again, no one can make you leave if you don't want to or are too scared to, what have you. And so they came out, helped pack up my family, and amusingly enough, his mom...
Wait, who came out to help pack up your family?
My dad.
Oh, okay. So your other family.
Yeah. And then, amusingly enough, my ex's mom said, "Oh, are you gonna ride out with them?" I was like, "No, I was just gonna give them my bag so that I don't have to pay $50 to put it on the plane." But you know what? It's actually a really good idea. What do you know? So the day that everyone was set to leave, I went over, I got dressed like I was going to work. He was working a 12 to 10 shift. I was working a 2 to 11 shift, and he worked a little further out than I did, so he got ready and left first. But I got dressed like I was going to work and drove the car to where I worked, handed the keys to the manager over the front end, hopped in a friend's car. They drove me over to where my family was leaving from, and sure enough, yep, never looked back. And by the time he got off, I was 600 miles away.
Nice.
But the first pit stop that we made, the first McDonald's, food, bathroom, what have you, I took my phone, I took the SIM card out of my phone, flushed the SIM card down the toilet, and smashed the phone against the rock. Yeah, there's no way he was getting in touch with me.
Nice.
And then, funny enough, he posted on Facebook, "Oh, I don't know why, Alex has been missing for 3 days. I don't know why her family's not worried." Well, dipshit, if my family is not worried, grow a clue.
Yeah.
But yeah, at 9 years of dealing with that bullshit was more than enough for me. And as evidenced by the "it takes time to heal," I still remember it very vividly.
I'm sure. Well, and just listening to you, tell your story, you could hear the anxiety in there. And this has been how many years since?
2. It was
okay. So it's
2 years almost to the month that I left.
Wow. So it hasn't been that long. So that explains the anxiety in the voice. So let me ask you this. Are you still worried about him finding you?
Not particularly. I did forget to mention that as soon as I got out to my permanent location here, I filed a restraining order because of his violent threats and tendencies. And we got a lawyer to serve the papers on the way down there across the nation. And the judge said that if they don't show up, or the papers even said if they don't show up, it puts a potential warrant out for his arrest by not coming to court when summoned. And so that was really very much anxiety for me, because I go into the courtroom on the day of the hearing wondering, oh, he's not going to show up. He's 2,000 miles away. But what if he does show up? What do I say? How, do I just not look at him? and whatnot. But sure enough, no, he didn't show up. And the judge took his absence for an admission of guilt and issued that restraining order, made sure that, sure enough, I did not want to talk to him ever again, and made it very clear that if he in any way remotely tries to contact me, whether it be over the phone, over the internet, or in person, they will be going to jail. So that eased my mind just slightly in regards to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've seen a lot of former abuse victims, go that same route. They get the
restraining order.
Thank you. I was going to say registration order, but that wasn't it. They get the restraining order and then end up seeing them again and being like, oh, I miss him, so I'm going to go back and cancel the restraining order. And then wham, oh, look, you're in the hospital. So I've seen that. I've also seen the ones where they get the restraining order and the other person doesn't care. They just go completely, totally batshit crazy, find the person, hunt them down, just to kill them. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to scare you by any means, but if I did, I'm sorry. But I've seen that a lot where the restraining orders don't really work for you. And that's really sad. I mean, anywhere you go, the restraining order, I can't talk today. The restraining order only works when they're there when the cops show up. That's it. But, how long does it take to pull a trigger? How long does it take to smack the shit out of somebody?
Not very. But on that
And typically
note,
most police agencies have a 20 to 30 minute show up window. God, now I got hiccups. This is lovely. Sorry.
Well, on that note, though, fortunately, my dad, being the one that took, got me and saved me, whatnot, used to be in the military and has mentioned on several occasions that if for whatever stupid reason he decides to come find me, he was in the military. And fortunately, I still only live about 5 minutes from the house.
Nice.
So on that note, if I have any kind of inkling, it's call dad and let dad do military stuff.
Do military stuff. Well, my situation was nowhere near like that. But it was more on the emotional abuse more than anything. A lot of it, I was married for 5 years. And during that 5 years, I was slowly convinced that I was a worthless piece of shit. And it wasn't really until after she had already left and I woke up at 350 pounds and I looked in the mirror and I said, Jesus Christ, who ate me? Because, I was huge. And it wasn't until that moment that I really realized, wow, I was in a fucked up relationship. Thankfully, I didn't have to worry about the whole take her back kind of thing because I've always been one that if I get out of a relationship, I cut ties with the person. Now, in this case, at this point in life, I can say I understood what my ex did. I understood how she did it. I understand why she did it. And I don't hold any ill will towards her.
Kudos to you.
Basically, I let her do what happened to me. So, did I take the victim role? Sure. Because, I'm like, well, A, she was young. B, she had her own mental issues that she was dealing with. And it wasn't until after we had split that she actually went and got help and figured out what it was and got on meds and then learned some other ways to cope with her issues. And, I don't consider her a great friend, but, I am friendly with her. So, it can work both ways. And I know I really cut that story short, but that's okay because we got more to go through. All right. So, at any rate, I got through it. You got through it. It's possible. That's my point. And if you feel like it's not possible and you feel like you are a victim of domestic violence or in a toxic relationship and need to talk to somebody, for God's sake, please reach out There's a national hotline for domestic violence and toxic relationships, and that number is 800-799-7233. Please give them a call.
And I'd also like to tag onto that real quick. You mentioned saying that you're going to therapy to work on yourself. If you can at least get out of the house on the ruse that you're going to therapy, you could even make a drive down to the police station and talk to them.
Absolutely.
If you cannot actively dial 911 or the non-emergency line and say, this is what's going on.
Well, and I know
find a way to get out the house.
Yeah, there's another way too, where if it's at a physical point, and I'm sure everybody has probably seen this online already, but it is a true thing that you can call 911 and act like you're ordering a pizza. You know, if you can diffuse the situation enough to calm down and say, hey, let me buy you a pizza or something along those lines, you can always call them and they will, you know, they'll be like, yeah, I'd like to order a large pepperoni, please, or whatever the case may be. And the lady will on the phone, or whoever is on the phone, is going to say, do you realize that you have called 911? And then you say yes. And they will say, are you in a dangerous situation? You say yes. And you can say, about how long will that be? And they will give you the time that the cops will show up. So that is a real thing. You can do that. And that's one way. Now, that being said, the abusers may already know this as well. So, you know, you might be trying to do it a different way, like calling, I don't know, Uber or, you know, something. But you can always do that with 911. They are trained to recognize, you know, violent situations and stuff like that. And they simply ask you that yes or no question. You know, are you in a dangerous situation? Yes. Okay. And then they dispatch somebody. How do you heal then from a toxic relationship? The first thing you have to do is say to yourself, or stop asking yourself rather, why is this person treating me this way? It's irrelevant. Why did this person do that to me? Again, irrelevant. What is wrong with this person? Again, irrelevant. Are we hitting the point here? These are typically things, you know, are they just an asshole? Or are they a sociopath, a narcissist? Is this person just simply a terrible person? It doesn't matter. They're doing it to you. That alone tells you that they're a terrible person. Well, and they're not necessarily a terrible person. They might have mental issues as well. And I would hazard to guess that they do, because a normal, healthy person is not going to treat other people this way. Instead, I want you to ask yourself these things. What did I miss that I allowed this person into my life? How can I grow from this experience so it doesn't repeat itself? That's an important thing. You know, how did this person get into my life, and how did this person have a good night, Leah? And how did this person get to the point in my life that they could take over so much power? Do I want this to be a story about being a victim or a victor? And then, do I want to waste my time, my thoughts, my energy on this toxic person, or use it for a higher purpose? The key here is to learn from this. Figure out how they took that hold on you. Did they do it in persuasion? Did they do it in, you know, how did they get that power over you? Because if they got that power over you, that means the next person can do the same thing. If you don't identify it, you can't break the cycle.
Well, and that's something I definitely did when I left. I told myself that if I ever got in another relationship, that if I saw any of the signs of that I experienced, and I experienced most of them, that I would cut it off as soon as it started. I'm not going to let it go on. I'm not going to let them think that they can do this to me. And I did see something on Facebook at one point that said, it's not love you're afraid of, it's that you're afraid that everyone is going to be like the person that destroyed you. I'm glad that I don't feel that way, because in my mind, when he said, "You're never going to find someone else like me," my thought was, good, I better not. And I don't like to hold other people's actions towards the next person because I know everybody's unique. But I did promise myself that I am not going to let it happen again. And it did take some time to not feel guilty, though. Honestly,
Yeah.
I felt very guilty for leaving for quite a long time. I was still very depressed for about 6 to 8 months after leaving. But then I decided to focus on me, and I went to a bunch of concerts, had fun, did the things I was never allowed to do in that relationship. And slowly I started to realize I am worth it.
Yep. But I mean, that again, you had to identify those things that he was able to do to take control of you so that those were red flags, like right away, right?
Definitely.
It isn't something that you can just be like, nobody's ever going to do that again. And then the next person does it. And I've seen that way too many times. So grow from these experiences. Don't necessarily have them if you can avoid them, but grow from them when you do. You know, you are not a bad person. You are not a piece of shit. You are not a fuck up. You are not worthless. You are the exact opposite of those things. You're a beautiful person. You are very worth it. You have so many things that you are good at. You know, don't let somebody take that kind of power over you. So, in summary, and this actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be as far as time, but in summary, if you are presently caught up in telling stories about toxic misbehaviors of someone, the time has come to stop getting caught up in the name calling, contempt, and blame. Instead, it's time to recognize that you're just distracting yourself with all the drama, chaos, and the static. Yeah. The more you stay with and or complain about the toxic person, the more you're merely delaying doing the important inner work that you need to do to heal your wounds, expand your limiting beliefs, and show yourself far more love and respect. All of the time expended on them could be time spent expanding you and growing who you are.
And I had a lot of people, I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's fine.
I had a lot of people tell me how strong I was, merely that I was able to stay in the relationship as long as I did and not buckle under all of the abuse. And I think that affirmation from being told that I'm strong, being told that, you know, I am a good person, and I think somebody told me, you'll make somebody a great wife someday, has really helped me realize that it wasn't my fault. It was just a really shit situation.
Exactly. And, you know, I think that's the problem most abusees don't fail to see, is that it's not their fault. Again, you know, it comes back to that whole thing. You can't expect to change a person. You can't expect another person to treat you the way that you want to be treated if you allow them not to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I didn't have any of my own money that I made either during those 9 years. The entire paycheck just went to him.
Yeah, and that's pretty typical. I've seen that a lot, and especially in like BDSM type relationships where the guys have no concept of what they're actually doing in BDSM to begin with. They just get on this power trip, and that always worries me about my friends who get in those kind of relationships. But I'm not saying that they can't be healthy. I'm saying that the majority of them are not, because they're not done correctly. But we can get into that in another topic, another day. At this point, we are well over our hour mark. So I believe that's all I had today. And I decided that for the show, what we're going to do is a single topic each week. And that way we can make sure that we cover everything about said topic, right? And I also decided that I wanted a catchphrase to end each show with. And The best one I found, there's a movie, I don't remember if it's 80s or 90s, but it's Eddie Murphy, and it's called Holy Man. And if any of you have ever seen this was a great movie. And basically, he ends it all with, remember, let go, give in, and take the journey. For 106.9 The Arrow, Alex and myself and Taboo, of course, we want to say thank you, God bless, and have a good evening.
Have a good night, guys. We are about 4 minutes away from going live. Get your friends, get your family, get your friends' family. Hell, I don't care. Even get people that you don't like and get them in here. And we will get this party started.
Smashcast, and YouTube. And now you can contact us during the show on any of these platforms. Not good enough? Want to be live with us on the show? Give us a call at 970-999-5176. Would you like to be a part of our panel? Are you listening and want to give us your opinion? Well, now you can in more ways than ever. Taboo is live streamed on Facebook, Twitter, Mixer, Smashcast, and YouTube. And now you can contact us during the show on any of these platforms. Not good enough? Want to be live with us on the show? Give us a call at 970-999-5176 and leave us a message with your thoughts. The best comments will be put on the air, and if you leave your contact information, you'll even be able to join us as a live member of our panel. Taboo and 106.9 The Arrow. We're not afraid. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is again that time for Taboo. I am your host, Xanadu, and of course with me, as always, is my cohort, Alex. Alex, say hello.
Hey guys, glad you're here.
We are very glad you're here. Hey, if you have anything that you want to say, definitely slide it into the chat rooms because we have plenty of them open on YouTube, Twitch, Smashcast, Facebook Live, Mixer, as well as you can even get a hold of us through Skype if you Skype over to the Arrow Radio. And you can also call us. Phone number is 970-999-5176. We have a number of things that we're going to be talking to and about this week. Isn't that right, Alex?
It is indeed.
So
many topics, so little time.
I know. It's your team, Zan and Alex, Team Taboo. Woo! Team Taboo, yay! And stuff. Anyway, so what we're going to talk about today is going to be gender inequalities. This is something that I know Alex has a lot to say on because she's the one who suggested that. Abortion, it's been all over the news. It kind of bleeds in with our gender equalities issues as well. President Trump, Mr. Trumplet. And then we're also going to be talking about fear and how it controls you. We kind of touched on this, what was it, last episode? In episode 3, I think. And we're going to expand a little bit on that. We're also going to be talking about the law of one, of course, only this time, instead of reading passages at this point, passages makes it sound like biblical kind of thing, but we're going to be talking about what it is and why should you care. And then, of course, we're going to talk about human expansion into the cosmos, the inevitable issues with that. And we're also going to talk about what we hope to do with this series, the whole series of Taboo and all the things that we will be doing here. So, without further ado, let's start with gender inequalities. Alex, what are gender inequalities?
The in my mind at any rate, it's the double standards that the entirety of this world seems to have. In other countries, I know it's a hell of a lot worse than it is here in the U.S. The Middle Eastern women can't even expose more than their eyes when it comes to clothing, which in my mind is just complete bullshit. But here in the U.S., it seems like there's a lot of double standards as well. Also, the deviations in pay when it comes to salaries, which is annoying because I know there's a lot of strong, independent women out there in the workforce, probably infinite amounts of single mothers that are trying to make it on their own as well. And it just kind of like makes my gears grind and tick and just drives me absolutely nuts.
So with that being said, let me ask you, because obviously you're a woman and I am a guy, what are the gender inequalities that you yourself have been exposed to?
Some of the lesser ones, I would say probably, again, probably those that have been more exposed would say I have white privilege and whatnot. But
you're a white chick too.
Yeah.
That brings up a whole other thing.
Yes,
we
it
can
does.
go into racial inequalities on another episode,
But anywho, so like the whole, I saw a comic a while back that was like, when guys fart or when the guys burp, all the guys are high-fiving each other. Yeah, that was a good one. Let a girl do this in front of guys in public, what have you, and it's like, ew, that's nasty. Really? Come
well,
on.
I don't know if that's so much. It's a perceived thing. I don't know if like guys are really grossed out by that, or if it's more like, so if it were me, for example, I'd be like, that's so sick. But that's because, I'm from that generation and I'm not really grossed out by it. I think it's pretty funny actually, but I'm of the mind that, women are supposed to be this pure innocent creature that doesn't do those things and stuff like that. It's not like, it's not like I'm going to like fire somebody if they fart in my face. Well, okay, if they fart in my face, perhaps, but the whole point of that is that I don't know if that's so much a gender inequality as it is just kind of a toying around thing. Sure, I'm sure there's some guys that, South Park did a whole episode on queefing and how guys were like all pissed off about it and all this other stuff. Yet if they were to fart in a woman's face, then it's perfectly all right. That's South Park. It's extremely
Profane.
Well,
Rude.
not necessarily profane, but exaggerated. You know what I mean?
But again, like I said, those were minor ones. The ones, and this is going to go into the next topic, which, like you said in the beginning, kind of merges with this as well. Women being told what they can and can't do with their bodies by men is just nuts.
Well, yeah, and we're going to touch on that in the abortion segment, but I think when I think gender inequalities, what I'm thinking is twofold, right? If a woman is walking down the street revealing skin, whether in a sexy, slutty, or whatever kind of way you want to tag it, and then guys do the cat calls and stuff like that, all that kind of stupidity. That's, we're talking about old school stuff, right? I mean, this still goes on, don't get me wrong. But I think that there's the feminist movement is partially, I don't want to say to blame for this, but for example, I would not have a problem going down. Well, okay, I personally would not go down the street with my shirt off anymore. But if I'm going down the street with my shirt off, I don't see why, especially on a hot day. I mean, we live in Colorado. We have hot days, cold nights, cold days, hot nights, whatever. Having a woman go down the street in the same thing, in shorts and no shirt would not bother me. The double standard, I think, is more what we're talking about here, or what we intended to talk about here. So, that's kind of a weird example. For example, I don't think, and see, I don't have any of these issues. I don't think, I don't see, like a woman going down the street and then let's say she gets raped. Well, everybody's like, oh my God, she was dressed like a slut, and, slut shaming and all this other stuff. When, God, it's so hard to talk about this. If she were to get raped just because of what she was wearing, that's fucked up to begin with. Rape is fucked up anyway. But then if the same thing were to happen to a really good looking guy, that he gets raped. And I know a lot of women are like, oh, men can't get raped. Yes, they can. It's looked at differently. I'm talking about the difference there between male rape and female rape. And it's always thought that the woman is too demure, whatever that word is, too tiny, too frail, too fragile to rape a guy, when I know, in fact, it can and does happen. The social stigma of that is that, most guys don't report that kind of activity. They chalk it up to a really bad night and move on. And again, we're going to get into more of that kind of stuff with the abortion topic that's coming up. But
and there was even a museum exhibit that was put out that was basically the outfits of women and girls that were raped, what they were wearing when they were raped, and I'd say 90% of those outfits were no more skims, like exposing, than a t-shirt and jeans. One of them, I think, was a pair of pajamas. One of them was a dress that was almost floor length.
Right, yeah.
And it's like, if you can get, most of these cases of women getting raped are with them in regular clothing, then I honestly don't see what the lack of clothing would have to do with it. And going out, being in the service industry, you know, going door to door, when somebody answers the door in nothing but their boxers, and I have to deal with that, and I'm like, yeah, okay, not my choice, but okay, it's you.
Well, and I've been part of that too when I used to deliver pizzas and stuff. Pardon me. I can remember very vividly going to a house where the woman had just gotten out of the shower, like literally. It's like you were waiting for your pizza to get delivered and you took a shower. But yeah, she came to the door and a towel on her head and one wrapped around her, and then she takes the pizza and oops, the towel falls off. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, well, have a good night. You know? So I know the things happen to both genders. You know, I mean, it took a very long time for women to be able to vote. It took a very long time for women to be seen as equals in the workplace, and that still doesn't necessarily happen. And I think a lot depends on the positions, because I know people in lower paying positions are basically treated like dirt either side.
Yeah, minimum wage.
Yeah. But I think as the businesses look at more, I'm going to use the term qualified or more high-end type positions, that's definitely an issue. I know many women attorneys who don't get paid as much as their men. Me personally, I would rather have a woman attorney because I know how women can fight. And verbally speaking, you can't match. There is not a guy in the world that can match a female in an argument. I don't care who you are.
Yeah, we have tempers.
You do. But, I mean, guys have tempers too. It's just all in the different expressions. The part that bugs me most about the whole gender equality issues is it's creating another rift. A rift not between the sexes, really. It's male, female. And, you know, I can say whatever as a man. If a woman were to say it, is it the same thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's another thing. Especially in the workplace. If a guy takes authority, if a guy does what he has to do to be the leader that he needs to be, he is recognized as a good leader, a good boss. But let a woman take authority and all of a sudden she's a bitch. She's aggressive.
See, and I prefer to work for women. I really do. I can totally get in their mindset, and that always works for me. Where guys, it's kind of like they always have alternative motives. Now, this brings up another good point about gender inequality, especially in the workplace, is you have, I'm going to go back to the 50s, right? In the 50s, guys would, you know, tap people on the butts. They'd, you know, give shoulder rubs, that kind of thing. And it would be one of those things that wasn't really reported. Pardon me. Nowadays, if a guy is to do that, then, oh my God, there are so many lawsuits, and it seems overly frivolous. And this is part of the whole rape culture that bugs me too, is that if you have sex with somebody the next day or a week later or whatever, it can be claimed as rape. And it doesn't seem like it takes the whole thing into effect. Okay. Like, I'll give an example here. If I go out with somebody and we have some drinks, we come back to my place or her place, it doesn't really matter, and we have sex, and 2 days later she decides that I'm an asshole because I didn't call her back or text her back or something like that. She claims it's rape. I go to jail. It's pretty much a given, right?
Well, and then, of course, there's the cases where it also gets tries to get turned around, especially in the instances that you were mentioning earlier. Say a woman does rape a man and they take it to court or whatever.
They're laughed out of the courtroom.
They're laughed. They'll try to turn it around. It's always getting twisted in one way or another.
Yeah. So, I mean, what can you do about that? There's not a lot any of us can really do about that except for put a stop to it.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, but circumstances are what they are, and until we have somebody like Bran Stark in office that can actually see what went on and say without a doubt, definitely it was a rape or it wasn't, it's kind of hard to prove one way or another. Now, in the cases where it is a rape, the person who is claiming the rape is often treated shittily. They have to relive it over and over again, and there's so many little technicalities and stuff like that. So,
and if their story changes in any way, even the minutest little detail, then all of a sudden they're lying, and it's...
Or they find out, hey, prior to this person was promiscuous, or, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just because I had sex with 200 people last night doesn't mean I wanted to have sex with this person today, And it goes the same way with women, just because she's had sex with 200 people in a night and then somebody forces themselves on her, it doesn't mean that she wanted it. So,
especially in that business too,
and I mean, you can blame porn for that. You can blame whatever, but ultimately, and this is one of the quotes that I love from this movie. It's called K-Pax. If you haven't seen it, one of the best quotes in that entire movie is every creature in the universe knows right from wrong. Instinctively, they know right from wrong. So if they do something that's wrong, well, we'll hit a little bit more on that in the fear part of this segment too. But so, I mean, there's tons of inequalities for males and females. I do think that a lot more is felt by women even still today. But I'm starting to see that whole reversal of the situation. We'll see where it goes. But again, I think